Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, October 24th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Craig Gent, author of Cyberboss, The Rise of Algorithmic Management and the New Struggle for Control at Work. Also on the program today, in the CNN town hall, Harris calls Trump a fascist and touts her price gouging plans. National polls show a narrow race, but Maris shows Harris gaining ground, statistically tying Trump in his must-win states of Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina. A woman accuses Trump of groping her in 1993 after being introduced by one Jeffrey Epstein. The DOJ warns Elon Musk that his supposed $1 million giveaway in battleground states might be illegal. Seems like it should be. The LA Times editorial...
Imagine if George Soros...
Yeah. Oh my God. We never hear the end of it. The LA Times editorial editor resigns after the paper's billionaire owner blocks the editorial board's endorsement of Harris. After 40 days on strike, the machinists have rejected Boeing's contract offer of a 35% wage increase over 4 years. Israel's bombardment of Lebanon continues. The healthcare system in South Beirut hangs by a thread. France pledges 100 million euros in aid to Lebanon. And Israel again attacks a school-turned-shelter in central Gaza, killing at least 17, including an 11-month-old baby. University of Michigan regents, many of whom donated to the AG's campaign, Nessel, reportedly bypassed local prosecutors and went straight to her to crack down on anti-genocide protesters. Something like The Guardian investigated 85% of those arrested were charged under her auspices, and then the neighboring counties, it was like they either dropped the charges or it was a small percentage. Oh,
you mean the fundamental issue that we didn't talk about instead of smearing Rashida Tlaib?
Exactly. So she was exactly right about that. The CFPB forces Apple and Goldman Sachs to pay more than $89 million in fines over their joint credit card due to failures to respond to customer charge disputes. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. Apologies if I'm a little slow today. I can't believe how sick I was. Now, there's always going to be skeptics out there saying I wasn't actually sick, but...
And it coincides with the Giants' loss.
I needed a 3-day recovery after they put up 3 points in the Saquon revenge game, but I couldn't even enjoy football. I fell asleep because I was so sick during football. That's how bad it was. So get your flu shots, everybody. I'm pretty sure that's what I had. I got the COVID shot, and then I was like, oh, I'll wait a little bit closer to Thanksgiving for the flu shot, and it bit me in the ass. So I'm semi back to normal today, but still going to be a little bit on the slower side, so forgive me. Welcome back to Bradley, who is back from vacation.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks to Matt for holding down the fort and doing not 1 but 2, but sometimes 3 jobs.
Good to have you guys
absence.
back.
Yeah.
Say that. I can be back on scrolling my phone now.
Enjoy that. You deserve so much more scrolling time as a treat.
Checking all the chats and see if Sam's IM'd me something urgent.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about this town hall last night. So last night, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke to undecided voters at a town hall. It was hosted in Pennsylvania by CNN. Anderson Cooper was the moderator. We'll get to this in a sec, but he had like 1 million follow-up questions about whether or not she supports the border wall, just to give you a sense of where the media...
Which is what all the undecideds are thinking about these days.
And fracking.
We just talk about how do we fill an auditorium of undecideds at this point in an election? Like,
it's amazing. And I listened to them after give their assessments. 2 said that who were undecided they're going to vote for Harris out of this panel of 5 people. And I listened to them. I was like, can I glean anything from this? And it's like, no. These people make these undecided voters at this point in the game, they make their decisions based on things that like it's difficult for us to understand because we're so plugged in. And if you're listening to this show, you're already exponentially more plugged in than anybody who would be undecided at this point in the race. For the most part, I mean, there are the people that are holding out their vote in protest of the genocide in Gaza, and that's a very specific policy orientation. But for like the general undecided voter who's invited to this kind of thing, I mean, what the Harris campaign is banking on is that they're basically moderate Republican-leaning people. And I think that in terms of the bulk of the voters from a math perspective, they're probably right to target those folks. It doesn't lead to the best, I think, political campaign from our perspective. But on the substance, last night, she basically said we have to look at the filibuster to codify abortion protections. She also was asked how she'd be different from Biden, and she kind of just says, I'm not Biden, or my administration will be different.
Look at me.
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, we get it, but we need a little bit more than that. And she gave the exact same answer about Palestinian suffering as she had before, over and over again. It's the same memorized response, incredibly frustrating. But this part, in terms of like the positives, I actually thought she did a good job last night. This was a portion where she's asked by a town hall attendee about high grocery prices. And here she talks about price gouging, which I think they should lean into a little bit more.
To Eric Swenson. He runs a service desk for an IT company in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. He's registered as a libertarian, describes himself as an independent. He says he's undecided. Eric?
Thank you, Anderson. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Eric.
So my question is concerning groceries. Grocery prices have gone up quite a bit in the last 4 years. And some people blame former President Trump. Some people blame President Biden. Who would you say is correct? And what would you do to bring prices down for Americans?
Thank you, Eric. And you're absolutely right. You know it. I know it. I think most Americans know it. Price of groceries is still too high. And we need to address it in a number of ways. One of my aspects of doing what we need to do to bring down the cost of living for working people and the middle class in America is to address the issue of grocery prices. Part of my background and how I come to it is probably a new approach grounded in a lot of my experiences as a former attorney general, where I took on price gouging. And part of my plan is to create a new approach that is the first time that we will have a national ban on price gouging, which is companies taking advantage of the desperation and need of the American consumer and jacking up prices without any consequence or accountability. So that is one way. But to your point, Eric, there are a number of issues that we need to address in terms of bringing down the cost of living. It includes what we need is really a new approach that I bring to the issue of affordable housing, including, for example, rent. And again, I bring to it my experience, knowing what has been happening in terms of how corporations have been buying up blocks of property to diminish competition, and then rents get jacked up. And addressing that, both in terms of making sure that there is a consequence and accountability for that, but also investing in people's dreams of home ownership, knowing that for too long, frankly, both administrations in both parties, Democrats and Republicans, haven't done enough to deal with the issue of housing. And we need a new approach that includes working with the private sector. I say that as a devout public servant. Working with the private sector to cut through the red tape, working with home builders, working with developers to create tax incentives so that we can create more housing supply and bring down the price.
Let me just ask you about price gouging. I looked at your plan. You talk about going after price gougers, and I'm quoting from the plan, on essential goods during emergencies or times of crisis. I get that. How does that help, though, someone like Eric with prices that for years the grocery prices just been high?
Well, first of all, Anderson, as you know, and obviously CNN has been covering extensively what has been happening in the state of Georgia, North Carolina, Florida. It's a real issue. I was Attorney General of California. I was the top law enforcement officer of the biggest state in the country. I took this issue on because it affects a lot of people. And I'm not going to apologize for the fact that we need to actually deal with accountability when these, not all, in fact, most don't, but when companies are taking advantage of the desperation and the need of the American people. We saw it actually during the pandemic as well, where because of supply chain issues, there was a reduction of supply, and then they would inflate the price of everyday necessities. Not to mention, by the way, again, Donald Trump should be here tonight to talk with you and answer your questions. He's not. He refused to come. But understand that part of his plan is to put in place a national sales tax of at least 20% on everyday goods and necessities. And that, by economist estimates, independent economists, would cost you as the American consumer and taxpayer an additional $4,000 a year.
So that was, I felt like, her strongest answer, especially when she said that both parties were responsible.
That was fascinating because she was cooking at that moment. And then when she said that, she said both administrations first. And I think that was a little bit too honest.
She's very measured. Like, and this is the kind of thing where, you know, I don't want to overplay this, but I actually, before I got sick, I was having a conversation with Emmy on her podcast on Friday, which I guess it hasn't come out, Emmy O'Loren. I don't know if it's come out yet, but we were basically talking about the differences in how sometimes women have to present themselves in the public eye. And her and I were very much like instinctively aligned on this, which was interesting. And her, as a woman of color, I think understands this as well. But Kamala Harris has less leeway than a male politician, especially a white male politician, in the way that she disciplines her message. And you can see, like, when she gets all mealy-mouthed like that, it's this obvious self-consciousness, I think, about straying off message. So she can sound like she's memorized a lot of things at times. And I think that that is true. But it's also because she's being told, and you see her laugh less, be serious, wear dark colors, look presidential. I also think that's why they sidelined Walz. You know, I don't think that was a good idea. But they wanted to put him in the way that, by the way, J.D. Vance has been sidelined, but I think that has more to do with his unfavorables. They sidelined Walz because they were like, okay, this is the point of the campaign where she has to look like commander-in-chief. And for what it's worth, I think they're doing their best in that regard. But I like that she mentioned both administrations and then she walked it back. And the fact of the matter is that 37 states across the country have individual laws on price gouging to prevent companies from doing this kind of thing during natural disasters. When Anderson Cooper follows that question up, and he's like, well, we're talking about natural disasters. What does that have to do with the prices that this individual man, the registered libertarian, who, by the way, later was interviewed by CNN and said that he liked her answer about how she'd work with other people towards a solution, and then he was going to vote for her. He was one of the people who was swayed. It's like, work with other people? I thought you were a libertarian. Yeah. Anyway, but like, I mean, when she talks about price gouging in this way, federalizing this would make sense, because Anderson Cooper, dude, the disaster that we were talking about that led to the greedflation, which was called a leftist conspiracy theory for a while, which she actually articulated there. The disaster was COVID, and particular industries. Yes, as Harris mentioned, there were supply chain issues, there were backlogs and work stoppages because we have globalized our supply chain to such a degree.
And to capitalists, that is opportunity.
That it affected our economy. That's part of why the Biden administration rightly tried to onshore a lot of our manufacturing, and they've had success in that regard. And she would try to continue that policy. Cooper doesn't even like subscribe to the idea that corporations artificially jacked up prices that led to inflation, taking advantage of the supply chain issues and elongating those higher prices so they could take home record profits. It's in the books. They took home record profits. So if it's still just naturally occurring inflation, in theory, that would affect the stock buybacks and the corporate money that goes to the executives, but it didn't. And so that's what Harris was articulating there. I just can't believe that one of the top paid anchors in the country doesn't recognize that, yes, it was greedflation that led to these increased prices and still does.
So he also like alluded to maybe even a pre-COVID type economy thing. And like, okay, Anderson, Vanderbilt, Cooper, like the broader long-term trend is wages haven't been rising.
Yeah.
Very briefly, we saw some wage growth and everybody celebrates it like it's the new hallelujah, but that should be normal. That wages are growing because the economy is growing. And so like since the financial crisis, yeah, people's wages have stuck. So it does seem like if people's wages were growing, it wouldn't be such a big problem that grocery prices have been ticking up even pre-pandemic and stuff like that. Like it's just a broader context that is just completely missing from like, is this Kamala Harris's fault, or what are you going to do about gougers? Like, can we have a memory that goes back to like that the economy was still an issue in 2016 and Bernie Sanders ran an insurgent campaign about how not great it was?
Well, I mean, okay, so you're asking for us to have a memory. I bring you this next question by Anderson Cooper because this part was just astounding to me. Remember when the entire media ecosystem laughed at Donald Trump saying that he wanted to build the wall and that Mexico would pay for it? Well, now Anderson Cooper is very upset that Kamala Harris hasn't met Trump in the middle on this regard. This is where he followed up most in this town hall.
Compromise bill that you want to pass if you're elected. You said that's going to be a priority. It includes $650 million in funding for the border wall. That's something Republicans wanted. That was part of the compromise. Under Donald Trump, you criticized the wall more than 50 times. You called it stupid, useless, and a medieval vanity project. Is a border wall stupid?
Well, let's talk about Donald Trump and that border wall. So remember, Donald Trump said Mexico would pay for it? Come on, they didn't. How much of that wall did he build? I think the last number I saw is about 2%. And then when it came time for him to do a photo op, you know where he did it? In the part of the wall that President Obama built.
But you agreed to a bill that would earmark $650 million to continue building that wall.
I pledge that I am going to bring forward that bipartisan bill to further strengthen and secure our border. Yes, I am. And I'm going to work across the aisle to pass a comprehensive bill that deals with a broken immigration system. I think Jackson's question, part of it was to acknowledge that America has always had migration, but there needs to be a legal process for it. People have to earn it. Ugh. And that's the point that I think is the most important point that can be made, which is we need a president who is grounded in common sense and practical outcomes. Like, let's just fix this thing. Let's just fix it. Why is there any ideological perspective on this? Let's just fix the problem.
To fix the problem, you're doing this compromise bill. It does call for $650 million that was earmarked under Trump to actually still go to build the wall.
I am not afraid of good ideas where they occur.
So you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I think what he did and how he did it did not make much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything.
I mean, okay, so there's so much wrong there. First of all, the Anderson Cooper dude, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when this was considered a joke. And now it's like, oh, so you don't think it's stupid? You agree that we should be funding the border wall. I mean, yeah, that was a part of the compromise right-wing bill with the Republicans that Biden clearly thought that and correctly, that Trump would cave to his self-interest and say, hey, don't pass anything while Biden's president with the Senate GOP, even though Langford had been working on it for a while. I don't want to notch him a win. And so now they're using this on the campaign trail without really saying anything much of substance on the issue of immigration at all. And that's the problem here, is that we've talked about this repeatedly on the show. When you cede all of the context of the conversation or the framing to the Republicans,
saying there's a problem,
this is what you get. You go from 2016, where anchors like Anderson Cooper were treating the border wall as the joke that it is, and Trump's claims about Mexico paying for it as the joke that it is, to the moment in 2024, nearly 10 years since he started running, where it's like, well, don't you agree with him? Can't you meet Donald Trump halfway? And you leave that oxygen when you don't say anything except we have to fix our broken immigration system and Republicans don't want to fix it. And we got to be tough and also have a pathway to citizenship. There's a reason that the graph for public perception on immigration has gone like this, and it's not in the Democrats' direction. And, you know, it's a global phenomenon. The right is better organized. I think the Steve Bannonites and the Viktor Orban worship was a real strategy for global right-wing campaigns, particularly in Europe and the United States. But that doesn't mean that the Democrats in particular, as a political party in this country, haven't midwifed this political problem for themselves. And so... I
mean, she's doing the exact same thing Bill Clinton did to Bob Dole. You search Bill Clinton, Bob Dole immigration commercials 1996, and it's the Bob Dole's saying he's super weak on all this stuff, and Bill Clinton being like, well, look at all these cops I hired for the border.
Right.
And it has just moved, and what he said is it's grant the premise that this is a police issue as opposed to a immigration processing issue.
Right.
And also let's not say destabilize, I don't know, Venezuela by causing a depression on its oil industry type of thing, and displace people. Like this is a much broader thing than building the goddamn wall. And that it's become the sort of like, well, but are you going to build it? It's really bleak.
You see how the conversation has completely deteriorated, and all she would have to say is say, hey, you know, I believe in this country. Both my parents came here from different parts of the world, although that would remind folks about her being black and Indian, which she doesn't want to do. You don't even need to say that. The Statue of Liberty is a beacon of hope for this country. It says, bring us, you're tired, you're hungry, right?
You're need to breathe free, yeah.
Right. And so you can invoke that and essentially say, yes, our immigration system is broken, but we have to work together with the other side to make sure that people are able to be safely processed and their asylum claims are able to go through a court system as opposed to people constantly slipping under the cracks of our broken immigration system. And then you can do all your tough talk. But the real problem is not the brokenness of our immigration system is not that people are coming into this country. That's what America is in its most idealized version supposed to be about. We're supposed to be a nation of immigrants. I remember learning that in history class in high school or in middle school or whatever. That is a premise that you could invoke, and most Americans would understand that. And you could still do the tough talk. But just hitting Republicans on hypocrisy isn't enough, because then you just see it reflected in the media there. They basically now accepted the border wall as a legitimate premise of where to start the conversation, and that's a failure.
And I mean, that's what we need to get to, I guess, I know. But, you know, Aaron Riesland-Melnick has pointed out that when you actually walk people through this thing and say, like, well, this is what the deportations would lead to, or this is what actual sensible legal immigration, investing in making sure people, employers can't abuse them for labor or whatever. People prefer that.
Right, exactly. All right, folks, we're going to get to our guest, Craig, in just a second. But first, a word from one of our sponsors. If supporting foundational health was a sport, you would want Ritual on your team. They made Essential for Men, a multivitamin that's based solely on science and designed to help fill common nutrient gaps in the diet with 10 key nutrients. I know Sam is a ritualistic user of Ritual, and I gotta get this for my fiance, because honestly, I just feel like men in particular, not to stereotype a little, but sometimes aren't as good as taking vitamins or things like that as women, or maybe not as on top of those kinds of things. But when you have a subscription service, it makes it super easy. And Ritual is science-backed. It has multivitamins for men 18 plus with high quality, traceable key ingredients in the clean, bioavailable forms. 10 key nutrients in 2 delayed response capsules per day. They're designed to dissolve later in the small intestine, an optimal place to absorb nutrients. They are gentle on an empty stomach with a minty essence in every bottle that helps make taking your multis actually enjoyable. Ritual works with world-class certification bodies to validate their products. Ritual multivitamins are vegan, non-GMO, product verified, gluten and major allergen-free, certified B Corp, and made traceable. Ritual uses scientific tools to select lower carbon packaging, prioritize sustainably sourced ingredients, and set ambitious climate goals. Ritual is a female-founded B corporation, meaning they are holding themselves accountable not just to their company's financial health, but also the health of the people and our planet. Essential for Men is a quality multivitamin from a company that you can actually trust. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/majority. Start Ritual and add Essential for Men to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/majority for 25% off. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Craig Gent. We are back, and we are joined now by Craig Gent, writer, editor, researcher, director at Novara Media, and author of Cyberboss, The Rise of Algorithmic Management and the New Struggle for Control at Work. Craig, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So there is a lot to talk about, I think, about AI, but not the talk that you'll usually hear in the media, because it's usually about, oh no, kids are going to cheat on their homework, or it's going to become sentient and take over the planet, like some sci-fi movie, or it's about, replacing human beings, I guess. And there's some truth to that part, but usually the most highly publicized fears, I feel like, about AI are centered around how powerful and investment worthy that technology is. But your book talks about how AI has already had an effect on the workplace, and that may be a good place to start. How have workers in these particular sectors that you profile here in your book been affected by the rise of AI?
So in the book, I primarily look at logistical workplaces, but really because they're at the apex of a nexus of concerns that involve the use of precarious contracts, but also the use of technology over workers and to control the work process itself. So maybe historically we've often thought about technology being used to replace workers. In this book, I explore cases where what's really happening is that technology is being used to manage workers and to ramp up their performance to ever greater levels.
And so in terms of enhancing workers, what are the prime examples that people may be familiar with in their daily life?
It can be like carrot and stick. So some of the sort of carrot type approaches can be sort of gamification. So people who work with in the gig economy, for example, might have gamified kind of aspects of the interface that they interact with there to kind of like lure them into working harder and longer. But it's also the case that they use sort of very punitively. One workplace that I looked at, the worker would be tracked and monitored all day long by kind of a wristwatch. It's kind of more like a big sort of smartphone attached to his forearm. And he'd work through the day, and then the following morning he'd wake up to a text message saying whether that day's shift was confirmed or cancelled on the basis of the productivity score that he hit the day before. And so it had real kind of like work or not work consequences for him.
And so that's like more of a replacement of a management structure via AI, almost. Can you can you talk about that? Because that is a replacement of, managers they don't own the means of production. They're still workers. What does that mean for that class above, I guess, the people doing the physical work?
Yeah, so like this kind of AI is algorithmic management, which has been referred to as like the automation of management as a kind of shorthand. But it definitely has like a big effect, like number of big effects like on the workplace. There's this kind of like hollowing out of like managers' knowledge, where, you know, even supervisors within the work process, like they're not kind of there to like oversee so much as they are to advise people on how best to work to this kind of algorithmic system. Indeed, lots of workplaces I looked at, workers were frequently advised to just trust the system because, you know, the workers can be wrong about something, the managers might even be wrong about something because they're human, but the inhuman technological system cannot be wrong and is infallible. And it also has the effect that there's this kind of plausible deniability that, you know, quite bad things can happen to workers, but it's blamed on the algorithm rather than being blamed on the actual kind of like power structures that are deploying the algorithm as such. So although algorithmic management is all about the real-time monitoring, tracking, assessing of work performance and of workers, the effect itself is a managerial effect, same as it ever was in a way. It's just that it's a strategy that's sort of deployed to obfuscate the power relations of the workplace.
Does it also physically separate management from the workforce? So there's less of an understanding from management about the practical problems that the workforce is facing on a day-to-day basis, and it's more just about gaming. When you gamify like someone's workplace and an incentive structure in that way, then the managers are just there to manage the gaming of the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you see this in a number of workplaces where, you know, the point of management, like throughout the work process, so whether this is, you know, people riding for, you know, a gig economy company delivering food, or whether they're like working at Amazon, they're not interacting with managers with a sort of like a high degree of regularity. Their main kind of like interaction with management is actually interaction with an interface, like either an app in the case of a gig economy, or interacting with like a handheld scanner, or that kind of sort of like screen-based interface in those kinds of work that is like instructing them and sort of like telling them what to do. And if they've got any kind of like problems, it's not like they can kind of like readily take it up with the thing that is giving them the problem. Like they just have the interface to interact with.
And in terms of atomizing workers, does this also have a chilling effect on organizing when you kind of put an algorithm or computerization in the middle of the workforce? It also probably, as I was kind of alluding to with the management piece, it physically separates them as well.
Yeah, so it absolutely physically enables the physical separation of workers as well. So, I mean, you mentioned at the top there about, you know, AI being kind of investment worthy, and definitely one of the things that makes these technologies investment worthy in a work context is that they separate workers and make work both an affectively sort of dull experience, or at least monotonous experience, where the whole workflow is kind of governed by these sort of algorithmic steps and processes that sort of loop and loop and loop to make up the entire working day with very little sort of variation. But also that they enable workers to be organized like throughout a workplace in such a way that they have very little interaction with each other. And the combination of these two things together robs workers of time and also of collectivity, which of course are two prerequisites for any kind of taking action together.
And what I also found fascinating about your book is, in terms of taking action, there are other ways that workers will rebel, for lack of a better phrase, against these oppressive technological management systems. One of them was pretty funny, involving DVDs and Star Wars, but there are some examples, if you don't mind, telling a few anecdotes from your book.
No, this is everyone's favorite one, actually, funny enough. But so like with the management, the algorithmic management system, like, creates this scenario where work is very sort of tightly controlled and administrated by this technology, this set of technologies. And many workers that I spoke to for the book would try to find ways, any way that they could leverage agency within the workplace. And so often this centered around time and unsanctioned breaks, for example. So in one workplace that I encountered, the workers had discovered a code that they could press into their scanner, and it would momentarily sort of take them out of the productivity calculation, and this would allow them to go and take an unsanctioned break without any kind of like decline in their productivity score by the end of the day. And to the point, this was getting shared around to the point where, one worker told me that he'd go to the break room and you see someone else who's not supposed to be there, and they kind of like nod at each other, and it's like, okay, you know that, like, who's been sharing the code. So like unsanctioned breaks and sort of reclamation of time was quite a big one. But this the DVD case that you're sort of alluding to is that I spoke to a worker who worked in an online shopping department for a major supermarket. So these are the people who go around the store. It works different places. Sometimes they might be around a warehouse. In this case, he went around a regular store, but out of hours, to collect people's online supermarket deliveries that they've placed on the internet. And as he's going around, he realizes that the one small piece of agency that he has in his role is that he can choose the substitution if an item isn't present. And not only that, but when he chooses the substitution, if he substitutes an item and says it's not there, so I've chosen this one, then all of the workers behind him who would have been going to choose, item A, will instead be choosing item B, because he's also updating the stock inventory. So there's actually quite a bit of agency that he's got suddenly over the process of all these workers collecting people's goods. And he decides that every time someone orders a DVD of any kind, he's going to substitute it for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, for the reason that, in his words, it's a sick film and everyone should see it. And it gives him enough plausible. Do you know what? Like, I actually tried to watch that film 3 times now, and each time I fell asleep in the cinema. Yeah. So yeah. Well, anyway, but he was convinced, and as is his right, and he would substitute the DVD for Star Wars Rogue One, because in his words, there's a sort of like a latitude there. It's a Disney film, it's a kids film, it's an action film, but someone be ordering like Peppa Pig, and they're getting Star Wars Rogue One, which is quite amusing. And so, I said to him, like, is this not just sort of churlish? And he said, actually, it's serious to me. He says, away from the jokes, this is about dignity, because I'm paid so badly and my work is so tightly controlled that I feel compelled, for the sake of my own dignity, to make every moment that I'm at work cost that little bit more.
And can I ask, was that worker in the UK, or?
This was a worker in the UK, yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't mind talking a little bit about the role of unions in this, because, in the United States, we have seen Amazon union busting over and over again. It's caught the attention of the National Labor Relations Board. But the problem with our system is that basically these mega corporations have enough money to eat the fees that are levied at them by our enforcement agencies. And they can just tie up these unions, especially if they're smaller startup unions, in litigation and all that kind of stuff. The power differential, it's just so massive that they just engage in anti-labor practices that are flagrantly against the law and then eat the fines. Starbucks also experienced or practiced some of this. So I'm not as familiar with the percentage of labor that's unionized that works at a place like Amazon in the UK, but how do unions play into this?
Okay, so like the unions are, clearly aware of like what's happening. But one of my starting points for the book was an observation that despite the fact that this kind of whole set of concerns and this sort of like around this like draconian sort of work practices that seem to, give us very bleak prospects for the future. Despite the understanding that they are technologically enabled in some way, all of the demands that I was seeing and all of the sort of strategy that I was seeing was around precariousness, so primarily pay and contracts, and recognition agreements and seeking recognition agreements with employers. And this kind of strategy of always sort of prioritizing the recognition agreement would lead to some kind of unintended consequences, honestly. So, for example, one workplace that I looked at, they put all of their eggs into the basket of trying to get a recognition agreement, only to have a sort of smaller, more of a yellow union sign a kind of sweetheart deal with the employer. Which then forced the first union kind of out of there altogether. And so they hadn't even really begun organizing yet, and they'd put all these resources into recognition, and then the employer had sort of turned around and signed a deal with a different, more compliant union. But then that union that got messed over in the first case did the same thing to a sort of smaller, more grassroots union at Uber, actually. And that union signed a massive deal. This was a GMB, signed a massive deal with Uber, and sort of sang it from the rooftops as the first like major recognition agreement with a platform, a gig economy platform. But the trade-off was any mechanism of a pay bargaining, and as you might expect, then Uber. Then was suddenly like putting adverts onto podcasts saying, "Oh, we're good now because like we're partnered with the GMB union," and it was just a sort of big sort of PR stunt, So I think in the book, like one of the things that's been taken as a sort of kind of provocative, but like I hope it's kind of like a friendly kind of criticism, is that I do think that within unions and among trade unionists, and I count myself in that. We need to think differently about how we've been doing things, because I think prioritizing recognition, prioritizing things that kind of exist in these kinds of like boardrooms is playing into the hands of managers, and we're actually never getting into the question of technology whatsoever. And so the demands around the actual use of technology, certainly in this country, are really kind of nowhere. At most, they're kind of stuck on the thorns of like debates around like transparency and making the processes more transparent, which I think is a bit misleading, because really there is no section of computer code in an algorithmic management system that you could hope to shed light on that would explain the new power dynamics of the workplace. You need to speak to the workers for that. One worker I spoke to, he said that his union did have a recognition agreement with his employer, and the union had agreed for time and motion studies to be done on the workers, and it ended up with him having a heavier trolley to push around, and he was never consulted over any of it. So unionization in and of itself is I think we need to sort of move the conversation on a little bit to like the actual question of like union strategy. And one of the reasons why I look at these alternative forms of rebellion is not because I think that they themselves are the answer, but notably many of the people I spoke to who were engaged in them were not enamored with their unions, despite the fact that they were in them, and saw it as a more direct way to reclaim agency themselves. I would make the argument that unions need to be widening the repertoire of tactics and strategies that they're willing to engage in.
And I guess that brings me to the question of when the demands, I guess hypothetically, when the demands move from basically taking over some of the technology here, or from, transparency or for recognition, to owning a piece of the pie. I mean, that kind of thing sounds pretty a long ways away in the United States, but there are these big tech companies operate elsewhere, as you say. Could that be a path forward in terms of more ambition from union demands?
I'm unsure, and I'm kind of yet to be convinced of the argument that many unions the world over are making, in which they say, often as a line of defense, actually, they'll say, we're not anti-technology, we just want to share the benefit and make sure workers share the benefit. I'm not actually convinced that there is a great benefit of these particular technologies for workers to share in, because the technologies are designed to be anti-worker in the first place. So actually, I feel like in some cases, what ought to be the demand is some level, honestly, of like suppression or like pulling back from where we've got to. This could happen in a number of ways. So I know that in France, for example, unions have still used the kind of like legislative route, but what they've done is they've lobbied for a minimum order fee, so you can't get free delivery, and this is encouraging people to sort of group their orders together on Amazon, for example, and taking that kind of last mile pressure off of some of those supply chains that is enabling a bit more of a conversation around this kind of seemingly technological but really managerial pressure to absolutely optimize everything, which of course just squeezes labor.
And in terms of this, as it relates to gig work in particular, is that what makes this technology so unique too? Is that it exploits workers in this particular way, where gig work is a way for these companies to not provide any benefits for their employees and save a lot of money. And it seems like at least the usage of this automation is an extension of that way that the workforce has been conceptualized.
It's definitely the case that these technologies are being deployed, many instances, maybe even the majority, to facilitate precarious working conditions. I would agree with that. However, I would probably also go a little further and say that I don't feel that there's really any amount of fixing wages or contract conditions that would improve the way that it feels to work with these technologies, which is fundamentally that it kind of robs people of time, agency, and dignity. And so I feel like we almost need a sort of a different sort of starting point in that sense. I think that we often focus on pay because it's where we've become accustomed to beginning within sort of union struggles. But I think that when I spoke to many workers for the book, they're really complaining of feeling like they've been stripped of dignity. And I think that's something that we have to kind of take up, because what's novel to the technology is not so much like what it can enable, but it's the fact that it invokes an enormous amount of computing power. It's really the real-time nature of the technologies. They can track and monitor and redirect workers in real time, and it's putting that up against you and me. And it's not just happening in gig work, and it's not just happening in the Amazon fulfillment center. It's increasingly happening it happens in McDonald's now. It's happening in Starbucks, like it's happening in offices. Explorations being done on the algorithmic management of emotion through emotion trackers. and sort of like wearable technologies that we've previously associated with health, such as the use of, sort of Fitbits and sleep monitoring.
Or motion trackers. Sorry, I want to make sure. Emotion. Oh, okay. Well, back in my camp days, I'd get the $10 that my mom sent me and buy a mood ring at the store. I guess now mood rings for workers, because if you're not happy when you're working, you better make yourself happy.
That's right. I mean, you can get, you get the, I presume you have them in the US too. You have the rings now that, monitor your health while you sleep, supposedly.
Right.
But, think of these same technologies, these kinds of wearables that really become kind of like quite intimate technologies in a way, being controlled by your boss instead.
Oh boy. Well, extremely dystopian, but also really informative. The book is called Cyberboss, The Rise of Algorithmic Management and the New Struggle for Control at Work. Craig Gent, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, T.
Folks, we're going to head into the fun half shortly, but I wanted to play this one clip for you in lieu of a second guess. So Bill Ackman, people may remember this guy.
It's funny to call a guy a billionaire investor.
No, he's a billionaire.
But that's the thing is it didn't invent anything.
Yeah.
It's just there's not even a one major bet or anything that you can say. You're just he had a bunch of money and made more money with money.
But when you say investor, it's like when Republicans refer to themselves as taxpayers. It's like, I am providing value, so I am human above humans. Okay?
But of course they don't provide value. They provide money that people could get if we didn't give all these people money and hoard it, and then they take a return on it.
Well,
that's how they get more money.
I mean, on CNBC, though, it's hard to make that case given the ideological bent of the financial news channel, right?
That's the parasite news.
They have, I mean, Andrew Ross Sorkin here does the best, he's done some good interviews for a financial reporter, right? Based on the exact kind of underlying set of assumptions that Matt outlines there. So Bill Ackman, you'll remember him maybe as the guy who doxed Harvard students who were protesting against Israel committing genocide against the Palestinian people.
I remember him 10 years ago as the guy who failed to short a pyramid scheme named Herbalife. He lost a lot of money to a pyramid scheme, betting against a pyramid scheme, which is a funny loss to take.
Absolutely.
It is
still a billionaire, though.
And not taking any lessons about the broader economy, given that, scams like Herbalife can continue despite even a heroic individual like Bill Ackman saying it's a joke.
Yeah, and if Elon Musk jumping around like a dipshit, as Tim Walls refer to it, or if hearing Peter Thiel talk didn't already dispel you of the notion that billionaire equals really smart guy, here is Bill Ackman again, the anti-Semitism crusader, defending Donald Trump reportedly liking Hitler and saying he wanted Hitler's generals around him on CNBC.
First of all, you were a longtime Democrat. You've supported Democrats. We talked about this.
I would say I've always been a centrist, but I've supported more Democrats by far than Republicans.
I just want to read you. This is John Kelly, the former chief of staff of Trump. He worked with him directly.
Sure.
And he says that in many cases, I would agree with some of his policies. So you agree with the policy piece of this that I think Trump is presenting. But he says it's very dangerous. It's a dangerous thing to have the wrong person elected in high office. He goes on to say, in his opinion, he believes that Trump meets the definition of a fascist, would govern like a dictator if allowed, and has no understanding of the Constitution or the concept of the rule of law. He goes on to say that Trump had made admiring statements to him about Hitler, you're Jewish and care about Israel, had expressed contempt for disabled veterans, and had characterized those who died on the battlefield for the U.S. as losers and suckers. How do you get your head around that?
Well, one, it's one person stating a series of things, which I don't know whether...
There are 28 people who have worked for the president, not just in close proximity, but in the Oval Office with him, who have come out publicly and expressed things of this sort.
Pause it real quick, Brad. Sorry. Like this whole one person thing. There wasn't one person that said like, "Oh, Obama's reading like Joseph Stalin like party discipline pamphlets." There's multiple people before this. Trump's ex-wife in divorce papers saying on his bedside table, it's not Mein Kampf, which would be the obvious thing to say as a lie.
Still would be weird.
But it was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which is like something that I don't think she would know about published unless it was actually there on the bedstand table.
It's very specific. And again, these, Milley coming out and saying this is very specific in and of itself, and it's been corroborated. But the Trump campaign is going to deny it because there's no audio of it. But I mean, again, like this is the exact right line of questioning, I think, that he's approaching Ackman with, which is the inherent differentiation between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Because if this dude, Ackman, who again targeted like teenagers at Harvard and tried to use and throw his weight around as an alumni of that school, he took out LED billboard trucks with the faces of the kids, often minority students, at Harvard with their information and drove them around the square at the school. This guy's a deranged lunatic under the auspices of saying he's combating anti-Semitism. Here, Sorkin is explicitly saying the guy you're supporting, according to, he's citing John Kelly, but it was also the Milley statement, right? Is expressing admiration for Hitler and Hitler's generals. That would be pretty anti-Semitic if put into practice. Here's Ackman defending that.
In close proximity, but in the Oval Office with him, who have come out publicly and expressed things of this sort.
Actually, Kamala Harris lost 92% of her staff too. But that's actually, I think that's a relevant sort of point.
Wait. Kamala Harris lost 92% of her staff. She had staff turnover. Okay. Did they all leave because she was saying, "I love Hitler"?
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
2% of her staff too. But that's actually, I think that's a relevant sort of point. So if you want to talk about, I don't.
The Hitler thing.
I just want one piece on that. There are people who would argue that maybe she was not an organized person and was not a good executive in that regard, right? But I don't know of anybody who came out publicly against Kamala Harris claiming that she was for Hitler, that she was against the Constitution, and that she was calling people who died on the battlefield on our behalf losers. Let's stipulate that.
Okay. Let me address. So number one, I don't think Trump is for Hitler. Okay, I think that's absurd. Okay. And you know first of all, why say it when you know that Hey, I get this.
What do you think about his generals?
I don't. Go ahead. Maybe give me an hour.
Okay, let's see how long it takes. Please.
You know it's not true. Why say it?
So one, Trump's not for Hitler. Most of Trump's friends are Jewish. He grew up in the New York City real estate community. He's got a daughter who's Jewish. He's got grandchildren who's Jewish. He was probably the most pro-Israel president in terms of committing to do things and actually executing on them.
What he said.
Moving the embassy, delivering the control of the Golan Heights to Israel.
By the way, I'm just asking the question.
He's Hitlerian sort of Lebensraum.
The other thing that hasn't been.
Sorry, we have to say Lebensraum.
Yeah.
Which is, I forget how the exact definition, but basically what we called over in America, like room to move your arms.
Yeah, I think it translates like living space or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Elbow room, as James Fenimore Cooper called it over in the Americas, as we were dispossessing the natives. Like it's not a surprise that, taking territory in war, there's a through line here. It's very, I think, historically difficult for a lot of people to understand on the surface of it. But yeah, like when you have somebody like Bill Ackman, you understand how this happens, where Trump is a documented sort of Nazi curious person.
When he first ran for president, he went to or I forget when this was. I mean, again, he's been running for president for nearly 10 years at this point. But he went to a group of Jewish donors, and he's basically said, "You love making deals and all that kind of thing." The dude has... Yeah. I mean, his father was arrested at a Klan riot in the early 20th century in New York City, in Queens. Like, it would not be a shock that a younger Donald Trump would be reading Hitler speeches, given his lifelong fixation on trying to prove his father wrong, and maybe trying to be like him in certain ways. We don't need to psychoanalyze this guy any more than we already have. But I mean, I do want to just put out there for everybody what Bill Ackman represents here. He is dismissive of Donald Trump's clear red flashing anti-Semitism, I love Hitler, authoritarianism kind of thing. Because look at what he did for Israel. He delivered the Golan Heights.
Because of
Don't
nationalism.
you see? Because apparently that's pro-Jewish people, according to Bill Ackman. I would argue that continuing to tie Jewish identity to the Zionist project only furthers anti-Semitism. Now, I don't know if Ackman's ready to have that conversation, but at the very least, you should be, if you're a liberal Zionist watching this, and apparently there are a few well-known liberal Zionists that watch this program, one in particular. If you are still out there and you're basically saying that people who are anti-Zionist are anti-Semitic, look at how one of the most public, well-financed by himself Zionists out there is defending the guy who praised Hitler and Hitler's generals because of his defense of Israel. That says everything you need to know, because it's not about Jewish identity.
It's about nationalism.
At the end of the day, it's about colonialism, it's about expansionism. And it's about billionaire ghouls like this guy wanting to take all of the territory in what operates as Greater Israel, but is really the occupied West Bank and the open-air prison that is the Gaza Strip. And when we're talking about historical parallels, you see the images coming out of northern Gaza as they continue to push Palestinians together into these very tiny portions of the Strip, and you can't help but think about the Warsaw Ghetto, in my view.
Of course, Sam was talking about that when you were out.
Oh, there we go. Where and the rebellions, by the way.
Yep.
But the concentration of a group of people and putting them on a diet and starving them as they did in Warsaw. And then there was a part 2 to that. And when I see Palestinian men being driven out on trucks with their hands bound behind them, shirtless, and they're blindfolded, what do you think is happening next?
Yeah, it's extermination. And I mean, people like Bill Ackman, liberal Zionists, have gotten a lot of mileage out of the on the surface contradiction of Jewish people and Nazis. When you put it as Zionists and Nazis, there's actually a historical precedent to this. You can search the Novara Agreement, which I agree with like Hassan that it's not great to overemphasize things like that. But nationalism is the problem here. And Bill Ackman is doing Hitler apology for Donald Trump because Donald Trump is the greater supporter of Israel in this election.
Exactly
and
right.
It's a close race.
Yeah. Not as close as I think the media is making it, in my view. I mean,
well, that's what's funny.
I have a whole nother rant about the media is very invested in. It's such a close race. Tune in to our 24-hour countdown clock to Kamala Harris's town hall. Like, I mean, we got to be a little bit honest about the incentives for the media in terms of making this into the. And on the surface, I get it. There are a lot of polls that say it's exactly close, but in terms of the, there's also a lot of pollsters who were really embarrassed by 2016. And then in 2020, there were issues with the methodology because the people that were being called were all the folks that were more willing to answer the phone in 2020 were more likely to be Democrats because they were isolating during COVID, and Republicans were out and about. But they still got things right. It's just that they thought Biden was going to win by a wider margin. A lot of experts think they're overcorrecting in the way that they did in 2022 for Republicans. So. But I mean, knocking on wood.
I hope you're right about that. Well, one other point I wanted to make about it's weird. Like, their party is like both supporters of Israel, right? We know this.
Yeah.
It does seem like the Republican Party is like, I've always sort of like thought like, okay, the Republicans are Likud and the Democrats are Labor.
Yeah.
Right. This whole thing that we got going on, you start to see a little bit of the liberal Zionists starting to be like, oh, we have to be a Likud.
Yeah.
Like, that's the logic of this. That's, I think, some of the stuff we're seeing in the streaming space is some liberal Zionists are realizing actually Likud, the thing that I believed, actually those fascists were the ones more clear-eyed about what it takes to actually do this, which is bloodshed and violence and using any provocation to ethnically cleanse a population out of an area. And the liberal Zionists were just in sort of a fantasy land. And now,
but they're choosing.
But they're choosing now, and I think it's not a surprise to me that certain people would break toward Likud as opposed to anti-Zionism, and it is a goddamn shame on all those people.
It really is, and I just I know. Oh, hello, Brandon.
I guess let me bring them.
We'll bring those guys in, but I've been coughing the whole time, so don't worry about it. But I just want to make this one final point there. Like, this is where the rubbers meet in the road here for liberal Zionists. And as Matt says, a lot of them are choosing to basically go down the Likud path as opposed to deal with this inherent contradiction where it's like, the Holocaust is one of the greatest crimes in the history of humanity. In the history of humanity. We also committed genocide in Africa. A lot of Europeans did. In America.
Maybe one of the greatest by raw numbers, depending on how you tot it up.
Exactly. But I mean, even like the Dutch genocide in Africa, where over a few 2 decades or something, right. They killed like 10 million people. Like, we don't have that same cultural memory about that, right? And I think a lot of liberal Zionists, they felt that because of the abject, unspeakable, but we speak about it, we have to, crime of the Holocaust and what that meant for Jewish people, that they've kind of constructed, because of that trauma, an imagery of a self-conception of themselves as inherently anti-racist, because they were the victims of one of the worst genocides in the history of humanity. But what liberal Zionists need to contend with is that that's not actually the case right now, because anti-Muslim bigotry in this country is bipartisan. And with liberal Zionists and with Zionists broadly, it's actually more pronounced. And so I think what's hard for liberal Zionists is that, I always voted Democrat. I always supported Black Lives Matter. I did all this kind of stuff that was easy for me as a Democrat, as a liberal within the context of the United States. But I think it really is cracking at the foundation of a certain self-identity to say, like, but actually, though, you are racist, unfortunately for you.
Because
what you went through in the Holocaust doesn't mean that you don't have to contend with that. And it's not just Zionists. We have anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racism in this country. Basically, it's the most broadly acceptable form of bigotry that I can think of, because both sides of the aisle engage on it on a regular basis. And liberal Zionists, as Matt is saying, they basically decided, some of them, okay, I'm just going to lean into the racism and say that the people calling it out are the real anti-Semites and bigots. And unfortunately for them, it may feel good for them in the short term, but history is not going to be on their side.
Yeah, and just one, I know we're talking a lot on this, but like and people have multiple identities, including overlap of both of these, but what the Holocaust meant for Jewish people and what it meant for Zionists are two different things.
Yes.
And that contradiction is appearing before our eyes right now. And, that's why it's, I think all the anti-Zionist leaders that we're seeing, like those people are showing the way. And this is a moment right now where people need to reckon with this thing. And there are a whole bunch of people who want to stand in the way of those people having a clear view of like what's just in this world. And I think they're going to lose. And they can be more and more hysterical in the coming months and they can be in our chat as much as they want. You're losing, guys.
Exactly. And who isn't losing are our winners over here, our guests for the. This is how you call. This is what a transition looks like, folks. We are in the winning circle. Thank you very much. I'm a professional broadcaster. Matt and Brandon. Hello, guys.
Here's Bradley, Brandon, and Matt. Yeah.
It's a crosstalk.
I'm getting over the flu, so apologies if my voice sounds a little odd. Brandon, what's happening on the discourse?
Well, we have a new episode out for patrons on the Patreon.
Man, you're muted.
Oh, I'm not supposed to be, am I?
No, you're
Still
back.
muted?
You're back.
Okay.
It was just a lag. Yeah. It was just a lag. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So I have a new episode out for patrons on the Patreon, as well as I will be uploading the first or third and second streams that I did on Twitch, and then we'll also be doing some more Twitch streaming tomorrow and or maybe Saturday. So follow me at Pretty Bad Lefty on Twitter YouTube.com/X, the Everything app, to find out when that's going to be.
All right, the Everything app, exactly.
The Everything app.
Where you go for inherently to watch videos. Duh. I mean, isn't that totally intuitive?
It's where I go for everything from like Nazism to neo-Nazism.
Broad spectrum. Matt Binder, what's happening on Scam Economy, Doomed, Leftist Mafia, all your shows?
Yeah, sure. So Leftist Mafia tonight, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, at youtube.com/Matt Binder. And last night I've been doing a lot of call-in shows lately, sort of just waiting out the election, like before getting into anything more meaty and diving into other things. So just, had call-ins and had one a very interesting call that turned into a debate. I still don't know if the person was serious or if they were playing devil's advocate as they were claiming, but I had someone who called in to debate Israel's right to defend itself. That was very interesting. So if you're interested in hearing that and my responses to them, youtube.com/Matt Binder.
I do love, the childish nature of Zionism. Like, they love to anthropomorphize this nation state, and it's like, I don't really think that nation states have character.
They're
but
surrounded by
go for
enemies.
it. Yeah.
And it's like, well, why? First of all, like, what is it? Just the religion, or did maybe an exclusive nationalism cause that? And maybe that wasn't the best safe space for Jewish people after the World War II. Maybe we should have just maybe allowed them to say have refugee in America. But
and you know how America ensured that it wasn't surrounded by enemies? We committed mass genocides so that we could control the entire territory from the Pacific to the Atlantic.
I wish I had a sound drop of the what's that? Not the emo, not Fall Out Boy, the other emo band.
Panic at the Disco.
Panic at the Disco, because there's one line was Manifest Destiny.
Yes.
It'll really always amaze me to see, especially this. Obviously, this comes from any sort of pro-Israel or Zionist type, but it always will amaze me when a U.S. official says this. It's when they say something like, the IDF is the most moral army in the world, or Israel is the safest place for Jewish people. It's like, you're literally throwing United States of America, your own country, that you represent, under the bus. We don't have the
Biden said that. He said there would not be.
The IDF is more moral than the U.S. Army. You're saying?
Yeah. Well, when you have to say it over and over again, you know that you're like, it must be legitimate. But Biden said that. Biden said that without Israel, there wouldn't be a safe place for the Jews in the world, or Jewish people in the world. It's like, what are you trying to say about the country that you're the president of, you moron?
I mean, I agree. America is very anti-Semitic, culturally, and also our politicians. And a lot of that anti-Semitism is manifested as supporting Israel, funny enough.
Exactly. 100%. We'll talk about more of this in the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. And we got to find EmMajority Report. So 5, 4, 3, 2,
okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour.
Wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour.
Yeah.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, all right. It's not a fun job.
Tour. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a tour. A real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour. That's a real thing. That's poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's poker with the boys. That offered a tour. That's a real thing. That's poker. Let's go, Joey. Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now, shut up. I don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's
Now,
one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best.
Violet tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't binge. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she
finance.
wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question. I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
And back.
We are back. Yeah, I totally forgot to promote ESPN today. We are going to be back on ESPN today. Talk a little bit about sports. You know,
yeah.
The Mets.
I also forgot my plug.
Oh, yeah.
We were just talking about the Mets in the break.
Yeah, no, I heard you guys. It's sad. It was a magical run, but Yankees Dodgers is pretty epic just from an old school baseball perspective. Now,
It's all about the Mets 24/7. That's the only baseball team that matters. And I was telling Bradley that might be my favorite. The 2024 Mets might be my favorite team of all time. Period. They were something special.
I mean, when they went to the World Series with God, it was like with Thor and with like that whole pitching rotation. I mean, it was pretty like it was with Syndergaard and all those guys.
I remember that.
Yeah, I mean that
But
was
this
pretty
was
good in 2015. But yeah,
this was something. This was a whole different thing. This was like they were being held up by memes almost with Grimace and the Iglesias.
They were
Oh my God!
Story.
It was yeah.
But yes, we will be on ESPN today. We'll give our picks against the spread, but we also got to catch you up on like a bunch of like major wide receiver trades in the league. We'll talk about Major League Baseball, the World Series preview. We'll probably touch on the NBA starting, the Liberty winning their first title, youtube.com/ESPN show. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, I am encouraging all parents or soon-to-be parents to go listen to the most recent episode of Left Reckoning with Courtney Rollins, who talked to us about daycare and why sort of universal daycare is something that we should maybe leave to liberal politicians, and expanding parental leave for parents is something that we need to actually set our sights a lot higher than, say, even like 2 months parental leave before you have to leave a goddamn newborn to go make money for your boss. So check that out. I'd be very curious to hear from the parents in the audience, and patreon.com/Left Reckoning if you want to support the show.
Ramona Frankenstein, I got my heart broken last week and just want to say that the MR community has done a lot and to help with my depression. Thank you, MR crew, and thank you to the kind people in the live chat for helping me get through this tough time. Can I get that sound drop of the guy in Tennessee, I think, who talked about how he likes to encourage posting? when he was busted flirting with some twink. Ramona, I'm sorry for your heartbreak. It's the worst. Here is that sound drop.
We'll load up. This guy takes a little bit long to think, but Ramona, just stay tuned.
Ramona,
and also
stay
hang
tuned.
In there.
Jody from Chicago, let's make some predictions for when Trump is on Rogan tomorrow. My prediction is it'll just be two relatable men talking about how trans people and immigrants are ruining some Musk. I think you missed a word. Some Musk fanboying, but what will happen when Rogan brings up the vaccine? Trump will talk around it. You know.
Rogan will puss out.
I think we're going to hear the most normal conversation two people have ever heard. I'm going to stake my reputation on it. I think you're going to be listening to those two guys. You're going to be like, wow, what a normal conversation. This is like riding a bus and hearing two people talk about the weather. That's what I think.
Bold prediction. Do we have
I don't know. I wasn't expecting Trump's.
Okay, yeah. Try to encourage people with posts and try to, help them if I can.
There you go. Bender, keep going. There you go, Ramona.
I was gonna say I could go either way. I mean, I wasn't expecting Trump's interview with WWE legend The Undertaker on his podcast to give us the most bizarre moment that I think I've seen of the year so far, which is, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they're talking about trans women in sports, and they bring up Amani from the Olympics. And The Undertaker brings out his 11-year-old daughter to come out, and she comes out and sits on her dad's lap. And Undertaker starts talking about like the reason, one of the reasons he's voting for Trump is to protect his daughter and, her ability to play in sports and about protecting his daughter. And as he's saying this, Trump is looking at his daughter and going, oh, she's so beautiful. What a beautiful girl. She's so beautiful. And it's like, dude, protect your daughter from Trump, for God's sakes. What are you talking about? It's so weird.
Yeah. I mean, that protect your daughter thing, that's the guy that shows up to their daughter's prom with a gun and like threatens the date or something like that. I mean, this isn't about protecting one's daughter. It's about men who have a tenuous grasp on their own masculinity, projecting that onto others, honestly, is my view of that. But
I mean, I have to imagine that at least like 1% of all Walmart sales are those T-shirts that just say like, if you touch my daughter, I'll touch my gun, that, stuff like that. And they all come from like a handful of states.
Yeah. That's that's definitely the demographic. But in terms of the Rogan thing, is he going to say yes to Kamala? Because he initially said he wasn't going to have Trump on. Because the Kamala campaign is advertising that they went out to Rogan. And I think she would want to go on there and talk about how she is for legalizing weed nationally, which Trump is not. So
if he was smart, he would have her on, because I think she would bring more views to his show than Trump. No one would be shocked at a Trump Rogan conversation. They'll give them exactly what they expect. But Kamala on Rogan, people will tune in just to see what the hell could happen, because anything could happen between that.
I think Rogan's too afraid. I think,
and he's actually political. The truth is, Joe Rogan does have a political slant. That big debate from like 8 years ago, whereas is he just a normal proxy for a typical guy? No, he never fucking was. A guy who was like a Disney talent in the 90s and has always been there. Like, no, he's been a rich guy for a long time.
It's just pathetic, though, that he initially said he didn't want to weigh in on the race and was basically neutral, and then caved to Trump, but isn't going to do that for Kamala, because at the end of the day, he knows his audience would be really pissed because he doesn't have the ability to push back. She would go there and do all her tough on border stuff and all these kinds of things that are more geared towards moderate Republicans, and it's more of what his audience would want to listen to. And he doesn't have the ability to be adversarial, so he'd just agree. And that would be bad for his reputation with his audience. I think that's really it.
I think it's going to happen with that in the vaccine too. I don't think he's going to press Trump hard on vaccine stuff at all. He's a big pussy.
Of course not. But will he insist on being able to smoke the entire time? Because Donald Trump doesn't like that stuff. He said remember Bill Maher, that whole story about how Bill Maher refused to not smoke weed in front of one of the guys from Jackass? Was it Steve-O? Right.
Yeah,
so Steve-O was supposed to go on his show, and Steve-O's sober. Right. And he said, okay, my one request, can you please not smoke weed? And Bill Maher was like, fuck you. Absolutely not. How dare you ask that of me? And he never went on. And that's, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Rogan changed his behavior, if at all.
He's definitely going to like sub himself to Donald Trump for sure, because he's so afraid of like getting pushed back, not online, but in like the circles he runs in real life. So much of this is like him not wanting to go to a UFC fight and get booed. Like he wants to be able to be like the color commentator for UFC in kind of a different capacity than he is the Joe Rogan Experience host. And if Donald Trump is like, oh, Joe Rogan, how'd you do this to me? Why did you betray me? Like he won't even be able to, like, they'll be booing him. They'll be throwing stuff. He's a coward. He's constructed his castle on sand.
Exactly. Let's do 7 here, Bradley. So, Tucker Carlson, not sure if you guys saw this, but he was at a Turning Points USA PAC event in Georgia yesterday. Turning Point USA is Charlie Kirk's organization. They were responsible for getting out the vote in the Kari Lake governor's race a few years back, and that went extremely poorly. So it makes me smile that Donald Trump has reportedly outsourced some of his campaign work to both Elon Musk's bizarre PAC that seems to be a bit of a scam, to put it mildly, and to Charlie Kirk's operation. But they still do these big speaking gigs, and Tucker Carlson showed up at this Georgia thing. And here's Tucker Carlson talking about Trump becoming president again and what it's going to feel like for America.
If you allow your 2-year-old to smear the contents of his diapers on the wall of your living room.
Whoa.
And you do nothing about it. If you allow your 14-year-old to light a joint at the breakfast table.
Hell yeah.
If you allow your hormone-addled 15-year-old daughter to like slam the door of her bedroom and give you the finger, you're going to get more of it. And those people end up in rehab. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them. No. There has to be a point at which dad comes home.
Oh my God, they're all standing there.
Yeah, that's right. Dad comes home. And he's pissed. Dad is pissed. He's not vengeful. He loves his children. Disobedient as they may be, he loves them. Because they're his children, they live in his house. But he's very disappointed in their behavior. And he's gonna have to let them know.
Okay, it's getting a weird place.
Get to your room right now and think about what you did. And when dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl, and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now.
What in the world?
It's not gonna hurt me more than it hurts you. No, it's not. I'm not gonna lie. This is gonna hurt you a lot more than it hurts me.
Come on.
All right, hold on, pause.
And you earned this.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
Hell yeah. Spanking your daughter.
At first, I just thought it was, just me having a dirty mind. But clearly, he knows what he's doing. Like, towards the end there. He has to. He has to. It's gross.
Well, he's doing religious, like, coded language. I mean, the entire base of Trump support, you could just basically copy paste 90% of what they say about Trump, and a lot of it could apply to Jesus Christ. Like, it's a very religious frame of mind in the way that they talk about him. And this is not just religious, it's also fascist, which, talking about a leader as the father of the nation, you don't need to go too far back into history to find some pretty genocidal and fascistic examples for that, where that applies. And Tucker is knowingly invoking that, but he thinks his little brand is a little cuter because he has some, history books in leather-bound books in his library that tell him that this is a good way to run politics. But that's how he's trying to invoke this here.
Can I just give some Carlson attended La Jolla Country Day School and grew up in a home overlooking the La Jolla. Sorry, I don't know.
Well,
La Jolla.
It's a very fancy
North
part
Dakotan.
of California.
La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club. His father owned property in Nevada and Vermont and islands in Maine and islands in Maine and Nova Scotia in 1984. His father, and just another thing about his father. Carlson was briefly enrolled in Collège de Le Mans. I don't know if you want to pronounce.
I do not.
A boarding school in the canton of Geneva in French-speaking Switzerland, but said he was kicked out. So yeah, I mean, interesting childhood that's probably very relatable to a lot of people.
I mean, I guess in terms of having a father that owns a lot of properties, but probably didn't give him a ton of love and attention.
Sometimes daddy takes you to the island that he owns.
or ships you to boarding school because he's been a bad boy. And but really, when he says you've been a bad girl, you've been a bad little girl, and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now, dude. I mean, he's trying to turn the audience on. And unfortunately, I think it kind of works for like half the men in that room.
He just wants to make America goon again. That's the new that's the new manga.
I don't get that one. I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right. Don't
That's all
explain
right.
it to me.
Yeah, no, we don't need to.
I'm too pure.
Yeah, you know.
But I guess maybe I've been a bad little girl. All right, keep going.
And no, it's not going to hurt me more than it hurts you. No, it's not. I'm not going to lie. This is going to hurt you a lot more than it hurts me. And you earned this. You're getting a vigorous spanking because you've been a bad girl.
Oh my God.
That's a real thing.
It has to be this way. It has to be this way because it's true. And you're only going to get better when you take responsibility for what you did. That's not said in the spirit of hate. It's not said in the spirit of vengeance or bigotry. Far from it. It's said in the spirit of justice, which is the purest and best thing there is.
There's like so much I would love to know about being a 21-year-old girl.
Apart.
Okay. All right. Apropos of nothing, this was Tucker Carlson last week on his show, the Tucker Carlson show on X. Again, apropos of nothing.
Brett Baer had said to her the other night, Madam Vice President, you talk about abortion law, have you ever had one? I mean, I think he would have been fired from his job for saying that. And he certainly would become instantly a villain. And you sort of wonder, like, why? Right. If there's nothing wrong with abortion, if you're supposed to shout your abortion, or like Tim Walz is very obviously gay. I look at him and I'm like, well, you're gay. And I'm sure I'll be attacked for saying that. Maybe he's not gay, but he certainly seems gay.
Right.
And
you immediately say, where's your evidence?
I don't have any evidence. I'm just saying the guy looks super, super gay to me. But they're the ones always running on being like, it's great to be gay. Okay, if it's great to be gay, then why is it an attack on him for me to say that? And why would it be out of bounds to be like, hey, Tim Walz, you seem super gay. Are you gay? Have you ever slept with dudes? Like, if you ask that question, you'd be fired from your job.
You're just asking that now. It's very controversial, right?
But why would that be controversial? If there's nothing wrong with it, then why is it so offensive to ask that question?
Right.
I don't like. This doesn't make any sense.
I think ultimately,
because
Democrats
he's not gay, you moron. It's not offensive. The idea of him being gay is not offensive. It's offensive that you're making these claims about him based on, I don't know, nothing. I mean, he's married with kids, but I mean, this is they're trying to redefine this whole race has been super gendered, and it's about defining masculinity in this incredibly toxic, patriarchal religious way versus one that is about being inclusive of everybody, a positive masculinity that Tim Walz represents. But like, I don't know, dude, maybe don't call other people gay and then go on stage and talk about how you want daddy to spank all of us. I mean, he saved it a little by making it a little girl. It's just, I don't know, I would say that's a little pedophilic, but that's just me.
It's very gay as a man to have kids who love you.
Yeah.
It's perhaps the most feminine characteristic an adult male can have. Their own kids loving them.
Right.
The way Walz said dipshit was probably like the most masculine thing I've seen from a politician in years. What we're not going to have is trust fund bow ties like Tucker Carlson come here and talk about what masculinity is.
Yeah.
Buddy, like we all see this. You're not fooling anybody. And he's a football coach. And I don't get the gay thing with Walz. That's very bizarre to me. But
I mean, earlier in the campaign, he was giving out tips as a part of his like dad tip thing about how to fix your car and what would be a cheaper way to, I don't know anything about cars, but I think carburetor is one of those things.
This is swift boating.
Yes, but in a contest of masculinity, I would like to see this guy. We have this photo of who I'm referring to here, right? I would like Tim Walz and this person, Mr. Bowtie over here, to work on fixing a car. and just have a little bit of a competition in the masculinity, in the masculinity arena, and we'll see how that pans out.
Well,
for Mr. Masculine over there.
Fascists have so many psychosexual obsessions,
Yes.
so many insecurities related to impotence, related to people of color and impotence, related to women and impotence. It's not surprising that like this, considering how, I hate to use the word normal in a way that isn't nuanced, but like Tim Walz is just like a normal Midwestern guy. Like he probably watches football on Sundays. He, fixes cars, things that I don't do, right? But he teaches football, and they're struggling with that because a lot of Republicans like to pretend that they're the mouthpieces for these like mythical working class white males who are beer drinkers and like football lovers, and they're not. They're all like effete, like they may not be coastal, but they're all like effete liberals who happen to be more racist. Is essentially like their backgrounds. They're all Harvard educated, and they're proud of it. And maybe you should be proud of it. I don't know. I don't care, but they are, and it's hard. Yeah, it's hard for them to try to like, besides their affected love of weapons like guns, it's hard for them to pretend that their masculinity is rooted in anything other than like misogyny, which is where it is
exactly right. And that's
La Jolla Day School, like what? Okay,
yeah, well, I mean, you say Harvard educated. Tucker Carlson was such a horrible student that his dad had to essentially pay his way into Trinity, which is pretty low end liberal arts college and known to be the most conservative of all of them, honestly. But yeah, I mean, like they want, as you're saying, Brandon, to define masculinity in a way that is religious in nature, that is patriarchal in nature, that is extremely heteronormative in a repressive manner, and that is essentially about domineering women. And Tim Walz, and why he was the best pick of the bunch, really, for Harris, and he's not been deployed in a way that I wish that he could have been over the past few months, although they're starting to get him out there again. He represents a more positive vision of masculinity. And I think that there's it's not reflecting, unfortunately, in the poll numbers. Like the stratification between the candidates along gender lines is basically 20 points in these swing states. It's huge. And so it's not necessarily reflecting, I think, right now in the way that men in these states that Harris needs to win are responding to her. I still think it hopefully is enough. But, the Democrats do need to get serious about this. And I think if they were going to lean into a family leave policy or child care, if they end up going down that route, which she's hinted at a little bit if she gets elected, incorporating a positive masculinity vision for the rest of the country, which includes basically dignity for men as breadwinners in many households, right? And saying like, hey, these plans can help you raise a family, right? As opposed to having to go to these incel influencers who give them that kind of vision of masculinity. Like, we offer more opportunity. We offer a way for you to feed your family and to live up to these ideals that you were told that you needed to live up to your whole life as a man, without putting other people down. That should be something that the Democrats focus on. And honestly, like, hopefully we cut into that space a little bit on the internet, because there's a lot of freaking incel influencers who take up a lot of oxygen.
And Tucker was one of those originally. We know Walz led the Gay Straight Alliance in the 2000s during the Bush admin, which I think is phenomenal. Tucker Carlson himself was in the Dan White Society. Dan White, he put that in his yearbook. Dan White was the guy who assassinated Harvey Milk.
Yep.
So, I mean, Dylan Roof style Rhodesia sort of affinity there with Tucker Carlson and a guy who assassinated a gay politician.
Great point. All right, guys, we're going to open up the phone lines now. The number is 646-257-3920. Bobby Western
do you have the follow-up clip, though, of apparently the audience chanting daddy at Trump when he came out or something like that?
Yeah. I do not. Perhaps Bradley can find that.
Because I think that'll do numbers.
His political career has not taken off on X, and so he's getting he's branching out. He's diversifying into BDSM.
Nick from PA, while Undertaker is bitching about protecting his daughter with Trump, Vince and Linda McMahon, part of Trump's transition team, are mentioned as defendants in a lawsuit where kids were abused by WWE employees in the 1980s. Maybe the Undertaker should protect those kids? Right, exactly.
Right.
Star Fox, Emma, glad you're feeling better. Are you going to talk at all about Harris's genocide groceries answer from the town hall? A little surprised you didn't talk about it at the start of the show. Love y'all. Left his best. Hi, Bumbler. I mean, I didn't talk about it because it's the same answer that she's given for 2 months.
Yeah,
so,
we mentioned that.
I mean,
there's been no change, no movement.
I thought about it, but it's just like, okay, she did say maybe she had stronger language about how horrible it's been, but I mean, I don't want
more aggressive bearing of witness. Okay,
yeah,
great.
exactly. And then it just, I get so frustrated. I'm watching it last night, just the passive language. But, how these massive campaigns work is they go to J Street, which is a liberal Zionist organization. Republicans are getting their talking points from AIPAC. Democrats are getting it from J Street, which, I think is basically an anachronism as a group. And they copy paste, and she says the same things over and over again. And I don't think that's going to change until election, for a while, if not past election day.
I mean, it should have changed earlier. And like now, I would look if she came out with exactly what I want, the policy wise. Now, I would say like better late than never. But I don't know like what effect that has on the election at this late. Like Humphrey did it in September 30th, and like once we're past that point, I just don't expect any move. I think she's absolutely in autopilot on that issue, and it's horrible. As it gets worse and worse.
It's horrible. Spank Me Kamala says, we have now funded the genocide for more than a year. I think the U.S. deserves to get attacked while Palestinian Houthis and Hezbollah will be driven with sense of revenge. Okay. Well, look, I mean, deserves. I don't think any.
We are provoking attacks against us.
Yes.
I would just say that.
No civilians deserve to die. Deserve is the wrong word for it, but in terms of 9/11 was clearly the result in many ways of our policies.
The allergy to chickens
East.
coming home to roost sort of rhetoric is one because you can't actually defend what we're actually doing that provokes violence against American civilians. So you just have to say, well, you're defending terrorism then.
Right.
Well, I mean, because it's an inevitable consequence of our, of neocolonialism, of settler colonialism, of our foreign policy, which is rooted in imperialism, that those chickens will come home to roost. And so a big part of the mythology in countries like the United States of America that engages in that kind of activity, same with Israel, is that any attack on Americans, civilians, or even military in a lot of cases, we do hear a lot of stories from the wives of militaries, the survivors of veterans that, while you can't say that they're not combatants, you can still try to engender an overly, I think, unrealistic sense of sympathy for them in the populace, where it's like, oh, well, when our soldiers died, it's basically just as bad as when our civilians died. And we've seen this with Israel counting of casualties too, that they will just count soldiers as though they're civilians. But my larger point is that violence as a result of our own actions, or just any decontextualized violence, which is obviously a result of our own actions, has to be presented as morally reprehensible and literally impossible. And it's not until the literally impossible is violated, that sort of bubble of course you'll always be safe. No, why would anyone want to attack us, that they start to really push to well, actually it's morally reprehensible that anyone would attack us regardless of what their reason is. In fact, we can't even talk about what their reason is, because otherwise people would be against it. More people would be against our foreign policy if they knew that it would result in obvious retribution against us. If forgetting the fact that it's
cultivating not right, violent hatred.
Exactly.
Yeah, they would be against it. More people would be against it if they thought that it would actually have consequences. But
exactly.
It doesn't.
I mean, and that's, I think, that informs also how Israel is responding to October 7th. I mean, the genocide that they're committing is also a way to say hey, any kind of blowback that we receive for our repression and our apartheid, we will meet it 400 times over.
It's justifying further violence by us.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it really amazes me that there are still people that don't understand that or are childish about this, and there are a lot of people, because I remember when I first started getting interested in politics really was prior a little bit to the Obama campaign in 2008, and I was a huge Obama fan when I was 14 going into that campaign. But prior to that, I remember being told over and over again as a kid, they hate us for our freedom. They hate us for our freedom. You know, even and that I would ask questions at school, and that's the answer that you would get from teachers too.
Because they're savages, which is the farther sort of between the lines of that sort of implication.
And then, you know, I'm 12 or whatever, and you start to go on the internet and read about things, and you're like, oh, wait, maybe this was more than just they hate us for our freedom. This was because of X, Y, and Z, because of our foreign policy, and it's quite easy. You know, I'm 12. That was a formative moment in my political education. The fact that people still haven't been curious enough to think about what we do in the Middle East and how it has consequences, that part does depress me a little bit, because it's really not that hard to find. All right, let's take a call here. Calling from an 831 area code. I think we're on speaker. Who's this? Where you calling?
Yeah, hi. This is Daniel from LA.
Daniel from LA. What's on your mind?
Hey, so many things, so I'll narrow it because I listen to you guys a lot, and I'm a politics junkie. Former journalist in the entertainment industry. Anyways, I love that you guys are balancing the coverage of Palestine with everything else going on. I think you guys do probably the best work out there other than Hassan.
Thank you.
Or equal with him, let's say. You know, I don't want to, whatever. But I guess I'll go back to what I called on before because, you know, LA is a big city as well as New York. I know you guys are New Yorkers, so we hear a lot about Eric Adams and all those things. I don't know if you guys are following the DA race here, but basically George Gascon, the former San Francisco DA.
I am not, so please tell us.
He ended up being our DA down here, and yeah, no, it's fine. He basically was trying to do bail reform and a lot of reform. The crime stats obsessed media basically are going after him, saying that, you know, all these people are dying and there's crime in the streets and it's rampant and all these things, and it's his fault. He has a opponent that's going for the hard middle, and I just want to point out to people that the hard middle that he's describing is what most people are describing in cities where they're like, crime is out of control, we need to put everyone in jail. He's basically saying, I don't want to put everyone in jail, but we need to have specific, concrete, consistent punishments that make it so that people are so scared to commit crimes that they won't do it. And I'm like, that's just putting everyone in jail, man. And I mentioned that because it's a big city, and I think you guys have audience in just percentage-wise, probably a lot of people listening down here. Also, a small update on the one city council rep here that basically was on a recording trying to gerrymander to make it so that black people, whether they pick a black representative or not, but it's a very segregated city. So he was just trying to make it so they couldn't pick whoever they wanted, regardless of who that was. He isn't resigning, and there's billboards around our neighborhood and on the freeway that say Kevin De Leon must go. And he, I'm almost positive, is hiring people to go spray paint them black, spray paint over the must go. So he's just a rampant common criminal. And yeah, it's a big city enough where I feel like I could post that on your guys' show, but you guys do great work, and thank you so much.
I appreciate that. I now remember when I remember Kevin De Leon from that past racism scandal.
And he's running against a very good candidate, Isabel Jurado, who is a tenants' rights attorney and very, pro police accountability. So hopefully she can beat him.
All right. Well, thanks, Daniel, for giving us an update on that. Rooting for her.
Yeah, definitely. Isabel Jurado, definitely. If you're in the 14th district of LA City, vote Isabel Jurado, please.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the call.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Let's do this Hezbollah story thing now that we're on this. So the latest outlandish claim by Israel is that Hezbollah, apparently, according to them, is hiding lots of gold, millions of dollars in gold and cash in a bunker underneath a hospital. What do you know?
Crazy that would happen.
It's so crazy. Hamas is hiding all their weapons under hospitals in Gaza.
If I was going up against Israel, that's the last place I would hide something.
Yeah.
Right, because it's the first place they look. But they are dumb savages because they're Muslims. So you have
They never learn. They never learn.
Yeah, duh. They're just blindly motivated by their hatred of Jews. Anyway, so the BBC was able to investigate this claim. They were able to go under the Al Sahel hospital in Beirut. That's where Israel is claiming that millions of dollars of cash and gold are being hidden. A reminder, Israel has decimated the healthcare system in Beirut, in southern Lebanon. It's hanging by a thread. I saw an American Wall Street Journal reporter got a quote from a hospital director. It's like dominoes. If we close, the other hospitals will start to close. So Israel is making, it's following through on its promise. A lot of the Likud party leaders said they wanted to turn Beirut into Gaza. My God, they're doing their best to do that. But here's another piece of their insane propaganda debunked by the BBC.
Well, we're on level -2 in the Al Sahel hospital. The area just behind me is where medical waste is stored. Even that was opened up for us to have a look. The morgue was opened up. All of the drawers were opened to show us there was nothing inside. Doctors have been opening piles of surgical scrubs, boxes of equipment, very, very keen to show us everything there is to see and to prove that there is nothing here. Well, I'm just coming now from the basement on -2 up to -1. We've been brought around the hospital by doctors. We've also been allowed to move around on our own. Doors have been opened for us in every area, cupboards. We've been allowed to see what there is to see. Now, the hospital staff are adamant that there is no hidden bunker here containing millions of dollars of cash or gold, as the Israelis have claimed. They say this is just a hospital where patients were being treated last night and where they had to be evacuated from the emergency area at great speed because doctors were worried for the lives of the patients and also worried for the staff.
So I also want to state the obvious here. Money and gold. First of all, if anyone had claimed that Israel was hiding a bunch of gold under their hospital system and that justified Hezbollah bombing it, the amount, I mean,
you don't even need to spell it out.
You understand how anti-Semitic that accusation would be, but when it's done towards another group of people to justify attacking a hospital, I guess it doesn't count, but whatever. I mean, weapons under a hospital, even if that were true, wouldn't justify it. Why would it justify it if there were gold under there? Who cares if Hezbollah has money? They're a political party in a different country. I mean, you can call them a terrorist organization. They're a resistance organization towards Israel. And I'm sure if I were to parse through the views of this resistance group as a cozy Westerner here in Brooklyn, that I would find many of their views distasteful. Perhaps they'd have an opportunity to update potentially retrograde social views as a political party in Lebanon if they weren't worried about Israel expanding their territory into Lebanon.
A belligerent neighbor that
and
regularly invades them.
Yeah, bombing the hell out of them. Perhaps they would have that luxury if that were the case.
Well, it's not like Israel's politics are particularly leftish.
Right. Yeah.
Well, genocide, I saw that guy notwithstanding.
Did you see that guy Noah Smith on Twitter, who's been one of the biggest liberal Zionist defenders, just the other day discovered that interfaith marriages are illegal in Israel? It's like we've been saying that for years.
But this is the American press for you, which is owned by Zionists, and that's why Zach Beauchamp at Vox is the guy on this same fucking beat. He's the Israel expert, and he thought there was a land bridge connecting Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah,
these people are put there for their idiocy and their pliancy to the people who are above them.
That Noah Smith guy's a real like scumbag though, because he was one of those people who was spreading misinformation about when those doctors were reporting that Israeli snipers were shooting children in the head, and they had the literal like MRI scans. I think they were not X-rays, but MRI scans. He was one of those people who was like sowing doubt about the veracity of those scans to the point where the New York Times had to even come out and go like, no, we've verified these. We've independently verified these. We've shown them to experts. They are what we say they are. And then he kind of just like slunk away from taking responsibility for that, only to now be talking about like, now for the first time reading the Israel Wikipedia page, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's astounding to me because all of this information was available to liberal Zionists prior to that. Like, what has changed? That, I mean, there are very few of them are.
They thought it was anti-Semitic back then. They didn't even look into it. Rashid Khalidi, nah, that seems like he might be anti-Semitic.
You're a baby. You're a little baby. You're a little baby.
Yes, you've just described the average conservative.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a number of things though. For real though, like some of the things we just mentioned, like it's the fact that a lot of people, and this isn't just on this issue either. A lot of times, people who bloviate so strongly about something, when especially if you're like a neoliberal or a conservative, they're usually like the low information individual. Like they're usually the one who's most uneducated about the issue, but think they know it all. Right. And then they bloviate about it, and it turns out that they later on discover something, but there's no introspection either. There's no introspection. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know this. Maybe I don't know about a lot of things on this particular issue. No, not at all. Not at all. But then also I do think, I don't know if this is this particular person, but also a lot of it, they just don't care. They know, but they lie. They lie about it. Yeah, they just lie. They know everything they need to know about what's wrong, but they don't care, or they support it outright. They just support it. They're just bad people sometimes.
Yeah, and I just want to correct myself really quickly about the hospital. I'm not sure if they bombed it, but they threatened it, and other facilities have been targeted in Lebanon. I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to keep track, but keep going, Brandon.
Well, I just wanted to say maybe the obvious, which is that this is why Israel does not want journalists alive or Western in Gaza right now. Because when you can just send a BBC correspondent to the place, to the hospital that you say there are weapons, and they can just go look around and report back live, it kind of destabilizes Israel's ability to spread disinformation and misinformation about why they get to do or expand their genocide, right? Yeah. Obviously, all of the previously disproved lies, all of the sloppy propaganda, this disproved lie won't be enough for people who want to believe in Israel's, inherent morality, probably because they want to believe in the United States' inherent morality or the UK's inherent morality, to start to reconfigure how they view the next thing that Israel says. But for someone who's been watching critically, this is just one of another in a pattern of lies, right? It won't be enough to get people who are cozying up to power to admit that they're chronic liars. But this is why they don't want journalists in Gaza. This is why they're targeting them in Jabalia right now.
Right, exactly. And I guess they bombed near, I don't know, the hospital.
That hospital they clearly want to bomb, or they wouldn't be saying that stuff about it.
Right, but that was the prerequisite before they bombed the other one.
Exactly.
It probably was a year ago, from this week, maybe, when we were having that conversation about the misfired Hamas rocket.
Literally a year
Remember
ago.
That, guys? A year ago?
And somebody in our space said that Rashida Tlaib should apologize for it, saying that Israel shouldn't attack hospitals. And then what happened since? All the hospitals in Gaza.
Well, it was apparently, this was a big issue in my personal life. This particular issue was the fucking, this hospital.
Israel would never. It was clearly
how could you say that without evidence that we're being told that it could be a Hamas misfired rocket? I said at the time, Israel, it took them 9 months to claim, they lied and said it was a misfired Palestinian bullet that killed Shireen Abu Akleh back before the active genocide began. They lie until they don't have to anymore, and then they go, whoopsie. I mean, that's how it goes. And so now, is there any even conversation? They're saying, well, we have to bomb the hospitals.
Yeah, because the terrorists are hiding stuff in there. Again, you see the liberal Zionists living in a fantasy that existed for a little bit and, round the clock out on things, but now they're just moved to more the Likud thing. Like, actually, this violence is justified and we're going to continue it.
And I just have such little respect for not reckoning with your priors in that regard. I mean, truly, as I just said earlier, you're a baby. You're a little baby.
A lot of babies
to live
out
in your
there.
little safe space, and not really reckon with America's role in the world, and by extension, Israel's. And frankly, there are a lot of liberal Zionists out there who are racial supremacists. They're racial supremacists.
Yep.
And
we see it.
And we see you. And functionally, your ideology is no different from Nazis.
Exactly, Likud Nazis. I would just say this is what liberal Zionists. This is their response to all this.
Well, I just can't even.
Anyway.
Thanks for joining the chat.
Yeah. Chris Burdick said.
It's funny. You can have. There's certain people that could have Sam on, but they'd rather take screenshots of our YouTube chat. It's coward behavior, I would say.
I had the flu since Friday, so I did just see, that Ethan Klein has included me in his attacks on Hassan. I will say that, if you don't want to have a conversation, if you think, I'm an anti-Semite or whatever, or Hassan is, we're not. I shouldn't have to say that.
It's stupid. I mean, go fuck yourself.
But he can have a conversation with Sam Seder. I mean, Sam is a proud Jewish man, proud of his Jewish heritage.
Go ahead, call Sam an anti-Semite or soft on terror. See how that goes for you, Ethan.
Unless he's too afraid.
And there's other streamers we don't need to name, but a lot of people having freakouts because they've shown their ass for a year.
Yep.
It's a gamer channel. This is one of those gamers that I hear about.
There's some gamers losing their minds. Yeah, a lot of weird, a lot of people moving in very strange ways. Recently.
I know.
It's interesting.
And again, I don't follow. I have maybe an old school media diet, so I don't follow some of this Twitch stuff. I only really follow Hassan and Vosh to a lesser extent because I'm friendly with both of them, and so I know their work from being friendly with both of them. But when I see this other stuff crop up, I'm like, Jesus, where did this come from? But apparently, I guess there's been some issue with
I've seen
Ethan.
some pretty gross comments out of a lot of different mouths that if people want to dig up stuff, racist bigotry and stuff like that, even Jewish groups, we can have this deep conversation about bigotry. Let's welcome this, folks.
Well, you actually listened to two people you just mentioned who are in that world, but are in that world for, weird reasons, because they actually are knowledgeable about the issues and actually do the work and talk about things that they know about. Talking about, someone like a Hassan or a Vosh, whatever you think of them personally, they clearly do the work and know what they're talking about and are very educated on the subjects they're talking about. The other people we're talking about, it's the same sort of, thing I was talking about earlier, when you have these people who don't know very much and bloviate about things. I mean, it's no surprise that so many of the people from the gaming world who made all their fame from playing World of Warcraft or some shit like that, all of a sudden over the past year or so, or a couple of years, all of a sudden they're all of a sudden political experts and talking about this stuff. They've been, all of a sudden that's how they gained their fan base. No, they are doing the same thing they did when they were streamers for video games or whatever. They're creating as much controversy and drama as possible because all they care about is views. That's what it comes down to. There's no other way around it, because that's that whole industry. You see it for all these guys.
And I think, Binder, to your point, there's clearly some sort of, I don't know, lately it's difficult to build up an audience, I think, if you don't already have an established platform. We're in a very calcified environment, consolidated market on the internet. And I think a lot of YouTube channels or Twitch channels or other, they're getting notes from algorithmic experts about how debate and conflict is actually the biggest driver of views right now. I used to work and look at some of those analyses, and you have to change your coverage based on that kind of stuff to get more views. And I think a lot of channels are following suit. We all have to make money. I get it. But I think what I like about what our show does is that we are a consistent product. And I think it also creates less volatility Because when you're constantly chasing, like, this is what this consultant or this person on this platform is telling you is doing the best for numbers right now, then that's going to change the next year. And then you have to change your value proposition or what you're providing for people in the next year. I would rather just do the same show the same way. I mean, adjust accordingly to an extent. But I do think, like, people should be aware that right now, my hunch from seeing on the outside is that there's a lot of data telling these YouTube channels that debate and disagreement is driving a lot of views and money for people.
Well, that's because they can't do what we do. They can't do like a torts conference show or have Mark Joseph. None of them want to do this like deep. I mean, I'm just looking through our recent shows, and it's just like all things that none of these people want to fucking do.
Yeah.
Like it's like our first half. None of these people have the depth for it, and so it is also just like policing other people's chats and just debased behavior like that.
But what you're talking about exactly speaks to the longevity of what we do and other people like us do. Like, you can see that we're like I'm talking about the Majority Report as a whole and other streamers who have been doing this for as long as we have in the news and politics world. There's longevity here because we know what we're
Kyle
talking about.
Kalinski's another example.
Or Democracy Now! A generation earlier.
Democracy Now! Exactly. Yeah.
We people know that when they come to us, whatever it is, even if they disagree, they know that we're legit. It's the same thing as why you hear like conservatives even say like, I might disagree with everything about Bernie Sanders, but that's a guy with integrity because he believes what he says and he knows what he's talking about from his perspective. But then you look at the people that we're talking about on the other side of this. There's a reason why every year or so, every couple of years, maybe if they're lucky, they're jumping on the new thing. Like why we have people who got big as World of Warcraft streamers suddenly bloviating about his opinion about Palestinian culture in his dirty ass roach infested room. It's because there's no longevity.
I don't even know which one that is. It could be anybody.
There's no longevity in what any of these guys do because at the end of the day, what they do is short-term, pure bursts of entertainment and are valueless. They bring no value to the world, period, in terms of what they do.
And the crowd ages out of them.
Yes, and the crowd ages out, and then they are left trying to bilk an entirely new generation all over again. That's why you got these old motherfuckers like Andrew Tate with influencing kids who are 30, 40 years younger than him because there's only those kids can be so manipulated.
The lack of perspective.
That this idiot has anything of value to offer you.
Yeah, 100%. All right, well, with that said, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 607 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 607. I think I picked you up. 607.
Yeah, hey, is this me?
Hey,
I know it's me.
This is you. Sorry, I think my computer froze. How are you doing?
That's okay. I'm doing good. I'm going to go by Dr. Dragon Rider today, Western New York.
Okay.
Yep, I have a few items on my list. My main thing that I wanted to talk about was that I bought a bunch of domain names for JD Vance, and I've got a bunch that are, if you mistype JD Vance, and I got a bunch that are his super PAC, or Elon's super PAC, excuse me.
I mean, first of all, is this a love letter to Sam Seder? Or, I mean, this is the kind of thing that really, really gets him going.
No, I'm doing
domain names.
No, I'm doing it for partisan purposes.
Understood.
I just want to fuck them.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, anyway, but I do have some housekeeping stuff. Okay, first of all, you guys didn't look at my Vergonia submission, which was better than all of them. You guys didn't make a flag out of it. You made a T-shirt.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Third of all, I said in a message one time that I was going to try to decode who the South Florida influencer was, who they tried to corrupt the voice of, and it was Ben Shapiro. And I have that recording. I think I sent it to you guys.
Oh.
So it was Ben Shapiro.
Wait, where did you send it?
I sent it to your the email there.
Majority
if you
Reporters?
look up yeah.
Bradley,
Yep.
what can we look up? What's in the subject line?
Just let me look real quick.
Okay, so remember when there was that anonymous conservative commentator that called into local news about, what was it about again? And they used
it was about about the Russian
Russian money, the tenant thing, and they used a voice changer. And
Yeah.
Sam had said we need someone to decode who this one is, and you're saying it's
let
Ben
me
Shapiro.
see. Oh, I said the name of it is South. Okay, the name of the subject is leaked South FL right winger influencer audio fix solved.
Okay.
So if you just type like leaked South.
Perfect. Say it again. Leaked.
Leaked.
Sell. SELL.
No. South Florida.
Okay.
Like
South. Okay. Leaked South.
Leaked
Okay.
South.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Dragon Rider, we from Western New York. Thank you for doing that. I'm sure Sam will be very pleased. We'll show it to him tomorrow. How about that?
Okay.
All right.
Cool. I had some. Wait, hold on. I have a bunch of stuff because I keep taking notes.
Okay. Let's keep it to
for
one. How about
stuff.
that?
Yeah, let's prioritize.
All right, prioritize. Oh, what do I do with these domains? I'm not just bragging.
I don't know, dude.
Sorry.
See, again, this is more
this is
Sam's purview.
stuff. We don't really do the domain squatting.
But I will say this one thing is like, so I guess didn't Sam direct Sarah Silverman's stand-up special? Was it Jesus is Magic? Is that correct, Sam Lore?
I have no idea.
So that was my favorite comedy special growing up. I must have watched it 25 times. And there's a bit in there about how Sarah says she bought Osama bin Laden's domain name and that he's going to have to be Osama 1 this time or something like that. And I loved that bit growing up. And then I find out that Sam directed that special, and I think maybe they were together. I mean,
nice.
or before that, I don't know. But I just found it so funny that that bit was in her special, and now knowing Sam personally, his obsession with squatting on domain names, I would love to know if he was the inspiration behind that joke, to be honest with you. But
and couchfucker.org now goes to JD Vance's website.
Oh, perfect. Couchfucker?
Yep.
Couchfucker.org. Oh, thank you very much.
Goes to JD Vance. Yep.
All right. Well, well done.
No, there's way more. But take care of yourself, loved ones. Good job, both Matts, Bradley, Emma.
Thank you.
Sam, of course, even though he's gone.
In absentia.
How about Brandon?
And Brandon.
It's fine. It's fine.
Oh, sorry, Brandon. Yeah, I always call you guys Brandley. All right, never mind.
All right, appreciate the call, Dragon Rider. Thank you.
All right, later. Later.
I do love the domain name thing.
I've tried it.
Get high and squat domains.
That's what we do in our off time.
It's the only legitimate way to earn money.
Totally.
It's funny, like back in like early colonial America times, people would try to predict like, oh, which way is the railroad going to go through, and then get to where that would like say cross a river. That's why Bismarck was where it was.
Right.
So that was a whole like type of person was just trying to anticipate the route of commerce in the future, and that's basically just what squatting domains is.
Squatting on domain names is, yeah. That's
Exactly.
That's the modern equivalent of it. All right, so what should we get to here, Bradley? What are you thinking? Oh, where's Bill Maher?
Is he talking with adults?
Yeah, I don't care about that actually. Maybe let's just do Matt Walsh here. Yeah, so 10. So
it's got to kill Bill Maher that her podcast is so big, right? Like he really thinks like he's the one who thought of her having a podcast. Remember that interview he had with her? He's got to be
With
killing
who?
him like
Hawk Twa
the
girl.
Hawk Tua girl. Like it's got to kill him that her podcast is so much more successful than his. When he was the first person to ever say, of course, that hey, you should probably start a podcast. He definitely thinks that too. You know he does. It was my idea.
I'm happy for her. I hope she's the next host of Real Time. I
Me
hope
too.
I hope she replaces him. And people are like, Bill Maher, who?
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so
Matt
Walsh here, we were just talking about positive and negative masculinity and the right's perception of masculinity being an inherently regressive one that's basically built upon rigidly heteronormative views and repression of women, white supremacy, etc. So here's Matt Walsh, who's an avatar of that negative kind of masculinity, talking a little bit about Kamala Harris. What else? And what do you know? He calls her a cackling spinster.
So if you wouldn't hire someone to babysit your kids, you shouldn't make them president of the United States. That's the big applause line at the end there. And the implication is that you would hire Kamala and you wouldn't hire Trump.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of reasons why this argument doesn't work. For one thing, this is a very awkward point to raise when Kamala Harris is sitting right there on the stage. As everyone knows, the number one rule when hiring a babysitter is to make sure that you keep Kamala's husband as far from her as possible. Doug, after all, has his own philosophy when it comes to babysitters. You know, as he always says, if you wouldn't want to get someone pregnant, you shouldn't hire them to babysit your kids.
Okay.
In fact, as it happens, Maria...
Did he say that? Did Doug Emhoff say if you don't want to get someone pregnant, don't hire them as your babysitter? I don't think that's a quote, but he did have an affair with the babysitter. He did, yes. His ex-wife has now come out and said, we've worked through this in therapy, etc. She loves Kamala. They have a good relationship. I don't know.
Our affairs aren't politics.
I
don't
do
know.
not care.
Yeah, who gives a shit?
I don't
Donald
care.
Trump.
It's not even the person running for election.
I know, but Donald Trump is the one who had the affair, who's had multiple affairs. If he really cared about this kind of thing, that's why it rings so hollow.
Newt Gingrich led the Republican Party when I was like potty trained.
Yeah, and speaking of potty training, who would you trust to do that more, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? I don't know.
I bet Trump was, not super hands-on with that part of his kids' development.
There are a lot of presidents I would trust to babysit kids over Donald Trump. And I don't even need to be partisan about it. I would trust George W. Bush, both his father and the son, to babysit kids over Donald Trump. I'd certainly trust Kamala Harris over. I pretty much trust 90% of the population over Donald Trump, who doesn't even know how to raise his own children, let alone take care of children right in front of him. So I doubt he's done any child rearing whatsoever. I just don't understand what this is. But because she's a woman, she has to be in his mind. And I don't know. He's jumping on this maternal role.
He's also an alleged sex criminal. I think that's probably what people were referring to more specifically than any particular like affair or like his personality even, right? Like the fact that he's, said things that might lead one to believe that he is like not only an alleged sex criminal, but one who targets younger women.
He was found liable in court for sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll. Okay.
All the stories out of like the Junior Miss Universe contest, which is a whole nother can of worms.
Oh yeah, right, exactly. And then again, this allegation just came out today from a former model that said that Donald Trump groped her after she was introduced to him by Jeffrey Epstein. So if Matt Walsh really wants to do this, we can. But whatever, let's hear him out.
Wouldn't want to get someone pregnant, you shouldn't hire them to babysit your kids.
In
fact, as it happens, Maria Shriver's ex-husband had a very similar approach to house cleaners. So this is it's a really weird thing happening here.
Republican, right? Okay.
But putting all that to the side.
Who cares?
Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I actually would want Kamala to babysit my kids. And not just because I'm afraid that her husband might come over and complicate matters. Kamala has no children of her own. There's nothing maternal about her. And when I'm looking for a babysitter for my kids, I'm definitely not looking for a weird cackling spinster like Kamala. Especially not one that's rabidly pro-abortion as Kamala is, because that tells me that she doesn't value human life and has a special disregard for the lives of
Matt
children.
Walsh does, yeah.
And yet here I am wanting her to take care of my children. So I wouldn't want that. Now, Trump, on the other hand.
All right.
Okay,
so,
but
yeah, go ahead.
riddle me this though. What is a step parent but the ultimate babysitter?
That is a good point. But do we know that Kamala met those kids when they were underage? Because if they were under 18, her pro-abortion messaging could have kicked in. And if Doug left those kids alone with her, who knows if she would have pulled out that Glock she says that she has and shot him right on the spot, post-birth abortion, right in front of everybody. You can't trust her.
She can't resist. She's addicted to them.
I know. I mean, once you get the taste for fetal tissue in your mouth, you kind of keep chasing that over and over again.
Matt Walsh
It's like Christy Nolan can't stop killing puppies.
It's the same thing.
It's interesting. Like we haven't tapped in with Matt Walsh in a while, but he's a Candace Owens friend. But there's been a lot of changes in the right wing ecosystem lately. And it looked like maybe Matt Walsh was going to be somebody who, he criticizes how much money we give Ukraine and stuff like that. Maybe we might get some anti-Israel, America First stuff from Matt Walsh. No, he's cucked and doing all this shit. What a pathetic worm.
Yeah, I guess his movie didn't do that well, right? Was it Am I Racist or whatever?
Yeah, we already knew the answer to it.
Well, yeah, right. Well, 90 minutes takes 1 second to say no or yes.
He's just trying to have a conversation.
Not about Israel.
Big pussy. Boring one. Although I will say, I've never heard anyone describe Arnold Schwarzenegger as like Maria Shriver's husband. What a weird way to that's who he was.
Who even thinks about
to.
Maria Shriver? I don't.
I know.
Right. Well, that's the conservative way to belittle a man, right? To say he's masculine or emasculate him. To say he's the husband, because the sort of the trope is that. A woman is commonly referred to, no matter how successful she is, as so-and-so's wife or something like that. So he's trying to reverse it to knock Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Matt just made that point off camera, though. How can you emasculate Arnold Schwarzenegger,
quite a masculine
the Terminator?
Right.
I just don't think anyone would know who you're talking about, because who thinks of Maria Shriver when that's such a a gossipy thing to think about.
TV guide type shit.
I know, right? Wait, are you reading Us Weekly, Matt Walsh? I mean, I don't know. Got to question your masculinity. Are you engaged in celebrity? He's on Perez Hilton. Oh, Maria Shriver and Arnold Schwarzenegger getting a divorce. Anyway. No, keep going.
Because he only buys it because he thinks it's U.S. Weekly, and so he thought it was like a patriotic magazine. But then once you get the subscription, you might as well read it.
You might as well. Here he goes.
That she doesn't value human life and has a special disregard for the lives of children, and yet here I am wanting her to take care of my children. So I wouldn't want that. Now Trump, on the other hand, is a grandfather with 5 kids of his own and 10 grandchildren. His children are all adults now and are still close with him and speak highly of him. You can tell a lot about a man based on how his adult children treat him and talk about him. In fact, that is a much better litmus test than the one that Liz Cheney is proposing. All that said, would I hire Donald Trump to babysit my kids? Well, the answer is no, because I wouldn't hire any man to babysit my kids.
Big gotcha. Saying no. He was like, would I hire Donald Trump to babysit my kids? Oh, no.
But why wouldn't you hire any man? Why?
Because it's not a man's role. It's not a man's role to take care of kids. Obviously, I guess. I mean,
I forgot about that.
I assume.
All the manly men know what the woman's role. Did you see Hulk Hogan out there recently saying, it's a woman's role to nourish, brother? That's what he said.
Oh, well, I mean, I feel like nourishing after hearing that. But if a woman's role is just to rear children and to be in the home, why are you hiring a babysitter at all, Matt Walsh? Why are you talking about the concept of babysitting at all? Because if your wife was a true woman, she wouldn't need a babysitter. I mean, this is the road that you go down when you create these rigid roles in this way. That's the problem. But and so he's disparaging her essentially as a woman because she doesn't have children and because she believes in the right to choose, which I don't know, dude. That would disqualify if it was just based on the right to choose. You want to look at the raw numbers in terms of how women view this issue of abortion, pretty much disqualify a good majority of women in this country from babysitting your damn kids.
And there's a huge lack of supply for babysitting in this country. Some people, you look online, people are like, oh, I hired a male babysitter because didn't have a lot of choice, and it worked out fine.
Yeah.
So look at that.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, aren't like, listen, I have kids, but never had a babysitter because you need, it still costs money even. And me and my wife made the decision that she would, stay home and take care of that because financially it actually made more sense.
It wasn't ideological, Binder.
It wasn't ideological. No, I didn't go, listen up, wife.
Brother.
Let me tell you something, brother. Your role is to nourish, all right? No, but like, isn't like a nanny, or at the very least a babysitter he's talking about? Like a nanny is different. And I don't know if he's interchanging the two. Like a nanny is someone who usually takes care of the kids round the clock, everyday thing. A babysitter is someone you hire when the husband and wife need to go out to do something. Aren't they usually young people though? Like, is Matt Walsh going to like a young woman that is going to watch his kids and being like, let me ask you something before I hire you. How fertile are you, 20-something-year-old babysitter?
Well,
like,
we're talking about a rich guy who probably has full-time help for his kids.
Au pair type situation.
Even if his wife stays home. Au pairs are younger, but oftentimes these professional babysitters, this is a part of the care economy that I'm hoping Harris maybe emphasizes a little more, because she's worked with the SEIU or whatever, that the care workers are a part of that union, and a lot of care work goes under the table. A lot of these workers are exploited, and in fact, Gavin Newsom vetoed protections for care workers in the state of California because many of them are women of color who give up the opportunity to raise their own children because they're doing labor for a wealthier family for that particular purpose. And it has some of the most threadbare labor protections in the country because rich people like being able to do this kind of stuff under the table. I mean, we want more protections and more regulations for care work that includes elder care and child care, and not to have this completely exploitative system that doesn't, I think, bode well for anybody.
Yeah, not to keep plugging the most recent episode of Left Reckoning, but Courtney Rollins was on, and we talked about like the daycare issue, and part of the problem is that now this is affecting middle class people. Like poor people always had really awful daycare conditions and stuff like that, but now we have situations where these massive daycares have employees like rotating location, so you're not even building up it's like gig work. You're not even building up a relationship with these newborn kids, often under a year old, and you have strangers coming in. Like that's frankly, it's not just daycare. We need to have way more. America is the only country without only major country without maternity leave, parental leave policies. The other ones are like islands we colonized, right? Like and it's crazy. We have all this discussion about kids, and that fact isn't being emphasized. And like that was my hope for Harris's campaign, and maybe my hope for if she wins again. That care economy stuff does need to be foregrounded because it's just an easy layup, I think.
Yeah, but we're in a small business focus mode, which is agonizing.
It was slightly off topic now, but when Matt was talking about that, it made me think like it's gonna only get worse too, because at least when I was a kid, and same for my wife, when we were kids and our parents were at work, our both of our grandmas watched us and took care of us after school because they were able to retire. My grandma was 96 when she passed away 12 years ago. So that's how old she was, the year, 1912 she was born or something like that. That's not the case anymore. Like my parents cannot watch my kids. They have, or her parents either can't watch the kids. They have jobs. And it's going to be that way. And it's going to be that way when we get older and our kids have kids. Like I don't imagine the scenario where I'm, sitting around, if I'm alive, sitting around able to, babysit the kids while their parents are at work, because I'll be working myself.
Exactly. I mean, it's coming, and that it definitely does need to be addressed more than we have. Paid family medical leave. It's crazy that we don't have that in this country.
It's an attack
Yep.
on parents.
All right, guys, I'm going to turn off the voicemail, or on the voicemail. I'm sorry. No more time for calls. We will take more tomorrow. Read some IMs and then we'll get out of here. Congressional baseball fan, or wrong Matt Walsh, Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually RFK Jr.'s ex-cousin-in-law. DC letter carrier, why would Ethan talk to Sam about an issue he has with Hassan? Ethan even said Sam wouldn't agree with Hassan's takes. Well, he doesn't know Sam.
He's coming at us too. Like, he's clearly got a bee in his bonnet, and he should talk to Sam about it. And also, Sam basically agreed with Hassan's perspective without, I mean, he didn't really dive into what he saw, but I've seen enough of Hassan to know that there's no real degree of difference here. And the people accusing Hassan of being terror are fucking losers and should be ashamed of themselves.
Agreed. And the reason I said that is because, I think I explained it. Sam is a Jewish man. We are not, Matt and I, or whatever, Hassan and I guess, in terms of who he's been upset with,
Ethan can very easily say we're anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And he can't have that with Sam.
There are so many anti-Zionist Jews. I mean, it's so amazing. Like, people I grew up with coming out of the woodwork to be like, it was like someone I knew from down the street who's a Jewish girl that I used to walk to school with, organizing anti-Zionist pro-Palestine protests in the city, and other people I know across the country doing that as well. Like, there are, especially young people, plenty of anti-Zionist Jews. They get zero representation in the media. If we had polling firms that were interested in understanding this, I think we could get a pretty good sense about how many young people are on board with this, because they're the only...
Despite the shit that they get anytime they try to venture in that direction by these type of people.
I mean, Jewish Voice for Peace, and If Not Now, are doing this exact work. And so, I don't know. I mean, but it's frustrating.
The jig, exactly. That's what it is.
The jig is up.
We can nuance this as much as possible, but the jig is up.
Yeah.
Because, the issue is, I think at the core is that a lot of people were self-describing as Zionists before it was known, before people really knew what it entailed, like what, Zionism as rooted in Israeli supremacists actually entails. And now that it's been problematized and it's now being litigated openly, they're having an instinctual reaction to that because they don't want to stop identifying with something that they now, realize is discordant with their professed liberal values. They just want people to go back to thinking that Zionism is good. But that's, cat's out of the bag. People know what it means now.
But there are a lot of people that are making a brave choice to reckon with that, though, Brandon.
Yeah.
There are people that are that are saying, I was wrong. Even Ta-Nehisi Coates is an example of somebody who's not a Jewish person, but who said, I've reevaluated my view of Israel as reparations for the Holocaust based on what I've seen. And so those are the kinds of people that I want to uplift. But there are little babies, whiny little babies out there who are upset that their self-conception of themselves as anti-racist, just reflexively, not based on work that they've done, but because that is how they've perceived themselves as, voting for Democrats their whole life, or again, the historic trauma of the Holocaust. Unfortunately, we've seen this throughout history. Trauma inherently does not make you a person, doesn't automatically make you a person that makes you more equitable towards other people. Sometimes it goes in the opposite direction, and sometimes it's about repressing others. So you don't get a shortcut because of that experience. You have to still be somebody that carries those values of anti-genocide and anti-racism into the present modern day. And that includes incorporating anti-Zionism and working to tear down the apartheid wall and racially integrate Palestinians into what has become Israel. Unfortunately for liberal Zionists, they can't contend with the fact that domestically in the United States, they say they're anti-racist, they say they're all for multiculturalism. Why are you for multiculturalism? This is something I wish I could ask other folks like this. Do you know why? Because for me, I believe it's the safest way to construct a society. I believe that people living side by side, alongside one another, breaks down barriers. It allows us to understand one another. It creates an outcome that is more equitable and less racist in practice, and makes sure that we move towards a society where people are not discriminated against, hopefully, ideally, one day. If you believe that as a liberal, and you're supposed to, then contend with the fact that you believe that a Jewish nation state is necessary, one that is made, that is identified by someone's religion, and that a wall needs to be constructed to keep those brown hordes
to maintain a demographic
out,
majority.
To maintain a demographic majority. They can't contend with that. And I'm sorry to talk over you, Brandon, but like I just that's the jig is up, as you say. That you can't reckon with that if you are a liberal Zionist.
I agree with your passion and I applaud you for having it. I was just, I wasn't making excuses for anybody. I was just trying to explain, I think, behavior. I will say to your point,
I know you weren't.
Matt,
I know you weren't.
No,
yeah.
I know,
Brandon was going to
Matt,
jump in to defend Israel right now. We missed him.
Going to jump in to defend Israel. Well, at the risk of further making myself a target, to Matt's point, I think for historical trauma to have resonance and for it to, be meaningful in some way, it has to be properly contextualized. And in a lot of ways, the way in which the West teaches the Holocaust has exceptionalized it. We talked about this at the beginning of the show. Outside of its genealogy with the other atrocities that were direct and indirect inspirations for it. And a lot of people treat the Holocaust as though it happened outside of modernity. It is that there is no rooting in what the West claims its own ideals are. And that prevents people from understanding how to prevent it from happening again, or even to identify how it's happening again. Because in many ways, a lot of the pieces that led to the Holocaust within our Western society are still there. And we just have never reckoned with that. Like the anti-blackness, the misogyny, the tendency towards ethno-nationalism. I think for a lot of Americans too, it's a little difficult because, a lot of Americans would describe America as a Christian nation because they hear that all the time. And they don't understand that Israel, when they say that they're a Jewish nation, is a little different because they're explicitly an ethno-nationalist project. It's not as though America, it has a lot of Christo-fascist elements in it and the way that our government enacts laws and chooses to legislate, but it's still a difference when, it's actually legally set up that way. And I think a lot of people just don't fully understand that when they're just reading what's on the tin, because they go oh yeah, there's a Jewish country and there are Muslim countries and there are Christian countries. It's no, there's a little bit of a difference there.
No, to even jump off what you just brought up, Brendan, I think that's the thing too. I don't think that obviously those people exist, but in terms of liberal Zionists that Emma was talking about,
I'm not liberal Zionists.
Right. But these are the people to jump off what you said. Then, in terms of liberal Zionists, these are the people who realize that the whole Christian nation thing is bullshit, and Christo-fascism and the sort of Christian right that is flourishing in this country. They know that is bad and wrong, yet they support that very same thing, but for a different religion over in Israel. It's the same thing. A far right, religious, fascistic regime is in Israel, just like you view Trump here. If you're against that here, you have to be against that over there. It's the same thing.
Well, they don't understand. I don't think most people understand what fascism is, and not just in the sort of minutia of fascism, but also what it looks like outside of its specific historical context in 1930s and 1940s Nazi Germany. I think they would have trouble identifying fascism, and neo-fascists understand that, not just the Likud party in Israel, but actual on the ground neo-fascists that we talk about every week on this show understand that all they have to do to get away with their fascism is not Sig Heil. And the fact that there are a lot of neo-Nazis out there who do Sig Heil just provides an extra layer of insulation for people who want to enact Nazi policies but are smart enough to understand that Nazism, ethno-nationalism, all of this stuff is not very popular. There's a reason why people are pulling away from Israel who used to support it, and then why some people have to cloak themselves even further in that plausible deniability, because ethno-nationalism, fascism, people know to shy away from that stuff when they fully understand that's what they're seeing. So that's why so much work has been done to, I think, hide what's going on in Israel from the majority of people, even if we are inundated with it every day, because people would just instinctually recognize, Ta-Nehisi Coates has been saying, once you see it, you're oh, I get it. This is bad. This is Jim Crow. This is someone walking down the street and seeing somebody of a different color or different race and slapping the stuff out of their hands and calling them a slur. It's stuff that people instinctually know is wrong unless they self-identify as a fascist or as a racist.
And some people are okay with it, and that is instructive as well once they see it. But this was This was what I was referring to about this Noah Smith thing. He just learned that interfaith marriage was illegal in Israel. WTF, this is insane. This is what we've been saying for years.
And somebody else says, is this true? Wow. What about interracial marriage? What about marriage between a straight trans girl and a man?
Is that a serious question or a sarcastic one? Because yes, Israel does recognize gay marriages and other kinds of marriages if you are coming into the country because they want as many bodies to displace the Palestinians as possible. But if you were going to get married in Israel or want your marriage recognized, it can't be done in Israel. Interfaith marriages are illegal in the most moral country in the world and in the liberal democracy that is in the Middle East against, beating back these Arab hordes.
All a lot less interesting to me than the fact that people that still have keys to certain properties expelled in decades ago aren't allowed back, but anybody with the right religion is able to just move on in. And actually, those settlements, taxpayer or tax incentivized through America. You get tax deductible support for the Israeli project.
Again, not anyone with the right religion. It's only some people, some Jewish people who are allowed to move right in, because we know that it's another thing that they hide from
certain
people as the Jewish nation. Yeah,
Yep.
it's an ethno-nationalist state in the most literal sense of the word.
Mikey Love, this whole Israel fascism discussion is fire. Definitely needs to be clipped and shared. All three of you guys are nailing it with clarity. How about all
some people are
four
going to
of
clip
us? All right, Dorsey, clip away.
I think we might get some positive clippers and some negative clippers on some of this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I welcome it.
I propagate it.
I've been missing the taste of blood in my mouth. All I've had are cough drops, the honey flavor. I'm sick of it. I want back in on the debate, bro.
I like a good cough drop. Sometimes I'll just have one as a treat. Like, I don't even have a sore throat. I'll just throw a Ricola in my mouth. I hope there's not a boycott against Ricola. I don't know.
No boycott that I know of. But
this
I'm
is
more
not
of
a real
Halls
story.
Person. There's some. They've come a long
Working
way in
man's
the cough drop technology space. Like, there's some really tasty ones that almost taste like candy. We can get back to that another day. But
I'm a feat. I like a lozenge. I get a little bit of that Geneva, Switzerland boarding school cough drop.
all right, I just saw the time. Let me read some IMs, and we won't talk about cough drops for another 10 minutes, and then we'll get out of here. Free Palestine, surrounded by enemies, like all the countries that shut down Iran's missiles for them.
I mean, that's the other thing is, like, say, Jordan.
Yeah.
Not with enemies like that.
No, that's another layer of propaganda. These are also autocratic leaders that are propped up by the West. I mean, Egypt, like, there's a reason that people talk about how those governments are complicit in the genocide of Palestinians, because they are, in part because they're paid off by the imperial power that dominates the region. Understand our foreign policy for what it is, you children.
Egypt is the #2 recipient of American foreign aid.
What do you know? The other side of the Gaza Strip, that's the #2 recipient of our military aid, the other border country. What do you know?
I was going to say something about mummies, but I thought that might be bigoted.
We're looking for all the secrets of the pyramids.
People might take it wrong.
Zionism ends here, says, it guts me to know that Biden is a Zionist, but the only thing that gives me solace is the fact that the spineless, morally bankrupt, and propagandized generation like you are the most disengaged, mentally deranged, and politically powerless lot in this country. Well, Zionism ends here. We'll see about that. We'll see about that. We will win in the end, but it just depends on how many Palestinians are murdered in that time period. Chargund, a philosemitic definition of anti-Semitism suggests it only hurts Jews and it's only bigoted or bad dehumanizing when it targets Jews is offensive for a number of reasons, one being that it otherizes Jews. Agreed. Persona non grata says, no way that's going to bite us in the ass if Trump loses by a hair. I'm not sure what you mean, what that was in reference to. Milo the Dang Bilo. Elbow Room was a Schoolhouse Rock song that did not hold up. Listen to Ween's cover of The Shot Heard Round the World if you want a tune with some real hair on its chest.
Schoolhouse Rock did an Elbow Room? Oh my God.
Train Boy. Emma's very lucky she doesn't know what gooning is.
Moving on.
Was that not when you put someone's backpack inverted?
Yeah, let's call it that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that was. Yeah. Yep.
I guess I don't know what it means either.
my friend's like freshman year, that was what it was called. I thought when it was a prank when we would turn each other's backpacks on the inside out. I'm afraid that this is something very dirty, and I should just.
Emma was gooning at school, folks.
Oh God. I went to an all-girl school.
Your kids.
Like that was our idea of really rebelling. Maybe we'll wear leggings and break the dress code today, and then turn each other's backpacks inside out. Okay. Bonus Hole says, I'm starting to get the impression that the Israeli government is disingenuous. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Bonus Hole.
What is the Bonus Hole even about? I remember that reference, but it's slipped my mind what the original context.
It was a very offensive way that was that got someone very
anti-trans stuff.
Yeah,
right.
about their vagina being referred to as a bonus hole, which to me, I mean, like that's a fun change up. I like a rhetorical flourish. Clumsy
I'll take
poet.
as many holes as I can get.
Yeah.
I want to be porous.
The more holes, the better. Don't clip it. Yeah, I will. Crypto plausible deniability prove number billions worth of jihadi NFTs weren't under the hospital.
Oh my God, that'd be so funny if that was it. The Hezbollah has the NFTs underneath the
jihadi ape.
Don't give them any ideas for
yacht club.
Don't give them any ideas for their like terrible like Israeli sketch comedy bits online. Those are always so like. Ugh.
All right, guys. 3 more. Mike from Bavaria. Speaking of gay and Tucker Carlson, I don't think Tim Walz ever endorsed tanning your ball sack. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Well, I think there might be something wrong with it.
Maybe. Like,
increases probably your testosterone or something. I feel like that's something that people talk about, like in the healthosphere online. like,
yes.
You got to tan your
Tucker took that up.
Tan
well, that's
your
what's funny is all these guys are on like testosterone supplements.
100%.
And it is very funny to see
them all get hair transplants, and they're all on T. I have this is a story for another day.
Meanwhile, my VO2 max is climbing the natural way. So, I mean,
I'm so full of testosterone naturally. They call me like T-Train at the gym. Sounds like everyone's stuttering. It's crazy.
Wow, real alpha male over here.
Yes.
Roxanne Xanax Bars says, I know the consensus that Trump chose JD Vance for the VC class money, but did we ever consider that there was a way to save money? He could only pay the graphic designer to change 2 letters and 1 number on his campaign signs. Trump dunce 2018 or 2028. Yeah, that's I think he is trying to hoard all the money for his lawyers. And the final IM of the day. Who is you says, I'm somewhat amazed at the wholesale rejuvenation of Islamophobia in the U.S. after October 7th, where any Muslim is considered to be a terrorist or terrorist sympathizer due to their religion. When the last major terrorist attack that occurred on U.S. soil was the Boston Marathon bombing of 2013. Images of October 7th activated such a large portion of the population. I don't know how we respond and educate, diminish the bigotry that is so ingrained within our culture since 9/11.
I would caution against saying the population. The population supports a ceasefire and stuff like that. The people who it really animated was the powerful people in media and politics who want to drop bombs and take land.
Yeah. I think it really is just more about when you just look at the structure of modern day imperialism and colonialism, right? And I think it... You know, like, I remember the dismissiveness about, we did Iraq because of the oil. And, you know, I think maybe I was a bit Pollyannish about it. But I think that this Gen Z, right? Is it X? I always...
We're Z.
I'm millennial, but you're Z, right, Bradley? 96? You're on the cusp. I mean, that generation, I think, now is fully anti-colonialist. Like, they understand exactly what this is. And... that's the reality. All right, guys. We'll be live for ESPN at 4 p.m. And so like an hour and 10 minutes. Check out Scam Economy, Doomed, Leftist Mafia, The Discourse, Left Reckoning. Appreciate you all. It's good to be back. We'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted